The evening light over the grassland fades in a slow, gentle way, as if the day itself is unhurried to leave. You walk from your family's felt tent toward the edge of the camp, where the first watch post waits. The air still holds the warmth of the sun-soaked earth, a soft heat that rises through the soles of your boots. Around you, the shallow valley that shelters the camp sits quiet, its slopes gentle and bare except for the low scrub and the grey-green tufts of steppe grass. Your home tent behind you is a round, sturdy shape of felt and lattice, and from its roof hole a thin trail of smoke climbs straight into the sky, pale against the deepening blue. Other tents stand scattered in no perfect order, each one like a comfortable hill of wool and hide, their door flaps facing mostly south, their ropes and tension bands creaking just barely as the air cools. You carry the weight of the watch ahead of you without any rush, your felt cloak folded over one arm, the long wooden staff of a guard in your right hand. The staff is smooth from years of handling, its base worn blunt by contact with dirt and stone. Moving past the neighbor's tent, you catch the smell of their evening meal, boiled mutton mixed with wild onions, a scent that mingles with the dry, grassy aroma of the steppe and the distant sweetness of animal dung burning. The cooking odor means the day's work is over for most of the camp, and now is the time for rest, but quiet talk inside the warm enclosures for the slow settling into night. Ahead, the camp edge appears as a line of wooden carts and felt-wrapped supply packs arranged as a low windbreak. The picket line for the horses runs just beyond, and farther still the night herd will soon be brought in. Your stool waits there, a simple three-legged seat of smooth birch placed beside a small pile of dried dung fuel and a leather water skin. Someone from the earlier watch has already set out these things, and you note the familiar way they lean the fuel pile against a stone to keep it dry. The stool faces out across the open steppe to the east, and as you reach it you pause a moment, simply looking at the wide fading world in front of you. Now the sky holds a color that has no single name, bands of ochre near the horizon, dusty violet higher up, and overhead a vast pale blue that will soon become a deeper slate. The sun has already dropped below the Earth's rim, and the light that remains comes not from any bright source, but from the whole dome of the sky, a soft radiance that makes shadows long and soft-edged. Your shadow stretches behind you toward the tents, merging with the shadows of the carts. You shake out the heavy felt cloak and swing it around your shoulders, settling the thick wool so it covers your back and chest evenly, the hood resting loose at your neck. The cloak smells of lanolin and wood smoke, a familiar combination that feels like a second skin. You sit on the stool, the wood solid and cool even through your trousers. The position is a familiar one. Your body knows this perch, the way your weight settles slightly to the right, where one leg is a fraction shorter than the others. From this spot, you can see the entire eastern approach, a long view across the steppe that rolls gently for miles, unbroken except for the dark scribble of a distant gully. No figure moves on that expanse, no dust rises, no sign of any other human presence. The camp behind you falls into its evening rhythm, a murmur of voices like the sound of a stream heard from inside a house. You listen without concentrating, letting the small noises drift through you. Someone calls a child's name, a two-syllable sound that hangs in the air and fades. A baby cries once, a short, sharp complaint, and then is quickly soothed. The silence that follows is deeper than before. The lowing of cattle drifts from the western side of the camp, a deep, relaxed sound, the animals already bedded down or moving slowly toward their night spot. These are the beasts you know by their coats and horns, the brindled cow with the crooked left horn, the old white ox with the patient eyes. They need no guarding tonight beyond the usual watch, and the sound of them comforts you, a baseline of normalcy in the gathering dark. Time passes, and the color drains from the land until only shades of gray and blue remain. The first stars appear not suddenly but gradually, pinpricks of light that seem to breathe into existence when you look a little to one side. You know these stars by their places, not by names, because your people have marked the sky by shapes and seasons. The bright one just rising in the northeast means summer is still here, but the coolness in the air whispers that autumn is not far. Above you, in the zenith, A small tight cluster of stars glitters like a handful of salt scattered on dark felt. You always notice it because it appears directly over the chief's tent at this time of night. You let your gaze wander across the darkening plain, your eyes moving in a slow, methodical scan. Left to the north where the land rises in a low swell, back to center, then right toward the south where a dry riverbed cuts a line of darker vegetation. Nothing stirs. The night is settling in with an immense patience. The wind that blew lightly during the day has now fallen to almost nothing, just the faintest breath that moves the hair on your arms when you push back your sleeves. Because of the stillness, sounds carry from far away, a night bird's descending three-note call, the distant yelp of a fox hunting mice in the long grass, the soft rustle of your cloak when you shift position. You think about the other guards at the far side of the camp, the second and third watchers who sit in their own pools of quiet. You cannot see them from here, but you sense their presence as part of the same net of safety that envelops the sleeping families. The watch is an old practice, older than any remembered story, a simple act of staying awake so others may rest. There is no excitement in it, no glory, only the slow, measured attention that turns the night into something deeply familiar. The edge of the stool bites slightly into your thighs, and you stretch your legs out one at a time, feeling the slight ache from walking the herd all day, a good tiredness that settles into your bones. The last light of dusk finally ebbs, and the camp behind you comes into its own as a constellation of fires. One by one, the evening meal fires are stirred back to life, the glow of them painting the felt walls of the yurts in shades of amber and ruddy gold. The nearest tent to your left belongs to a family of 5, and you can see the shadow of a woman moving inside, her silhouette bending to lift a pot or a child, then straightening again. The flap opens briefly, releasing a gust of warmer air that smells of cooked grain and tea, and then closes. Such small glimpses are your only connection to the interior world during the watch. The rest is a matter of memory and trust. You adjust the water skin so it hangs from the stool's back within easy reach. It contains cool, slightly metallic-tasting water from the camp's shared leather buckets, drawn from the shallow spring in the gully earlier today. You take a sip, letting the water sit in your mouth a moment before swallowing, and the coolness spreads down your throat. Then you set the skin back, taking care to hang it so the stopper faces upward. These small routines of placement, the order of things, give the watch its steady rhythm. The stars multiply now, filling the sky from horizon to horizon. The great powder trail of the Milky Way arches overhead, so dense with light that it seems like a dust cloud lit from within. You've always thought of it as the trail a vast herd left behind in the sky, a dusty track of stars moving from one season's pasture to the next. Directly above, the dark patches between stars feel not empty, but restful, spaces for the eyes to pause. The longer you look, the more stars appear, until the sky seems almost a solid mass of twinkling points, and you feel the immense size of the steppe pressing back against the immense size of the heavens. Your breathing slows naturally, matching the quiet of the land. Inhale, a pause. Exhale. The felt cloak rises and falls against your chest with each breath. A dog trots past, one of the camp's lean, yellow-coated guardians, its tail wagging slowly. It pauses near your feet, sniffs at the fuel pile, then circles 3 times and lies down with a grunt, its chin resting on its paws. The dog's ears twitch occasionally toward faraway sounds you cannot hear, but it remains relaxed, a sign that the night is peaceful. You reach down and briefly scratch behind its ear, feeling the warm, dry fur, and the dog's tail thumps once against the dirt before settling again. Behind you, the camp slowly quiets. The voices drop to murmurs, then to silence. A couple of tents still show a faint interior glow from oil lamps, but one by one those are extinguished. The only light now comes from the communal fires that are left to burn low, their flames subsiding into a steady orange heart of embers. The smell of smoke is a constant, a woody, earthy perfume that clings to your hair and clothes. You know that when you return to your tent in the morning, your family will smell the watch on you and understand without words that the night passed safely. You turn your head slowly, scanning the darkness in sections. Far out on the steppe, a darker shape moves, not a threat, just a small herd of wild saiga, or perhaps a solitary deer. The shape pauses, then melts back into the general darkness. The plain is never completely empty, even at night, but the animals that move across it are only themselves, following their own cycles of grazing and rest. You watch the spot where the shape disappeared for a long moment, then continue your scan. The wooden staff leans against your shoulder, its surface polished by countless nights of similar watches. Your grandfather held this staff, and his grandfather before him, or so the story goes. The wood has no carvings, no decorations. It is simply a tool, reliable and plain. Sometimes during long watches, your hand finds the smoothest part of the shaft, a spot just above the bottom third where the grip has worn a slight indentation, and you hold it without thinking, your thumb tracing the grain. The night deepens around you, the dome of the sky now fully black and blazing with stars, the land a dark silent sea of grass, and your small station a point of stillness in the vastness. You remain like this, seated and watching, while the camp sleeps and the stars wheel imperceptibly overhead, their slow passage the only clock the steppe needs. The dog at your feet twitches in a dream, its legs paddling against the ground, and you let out a slow breath that fogs the air just slightly before disappearing. The first hour of your watch unfolds exactly as it should, quiet and unbroken, a simple thread in the great fabric of the night. Before the last blue light of dusk vanishes completely, a new sort of quiet movement begins among the tents. You notice it first as a subtle shift in the shadows, a few figures walking with careful slowness between the felt walls, their shapes shortened by the low angle of the fading sky. These are the fire tenders, men and older boys who carry small clay pots cupped in their hands, each pot holding a single bright ember nursed from the main hearth that never goes out. The ember glows a deep pulsing orange through the clay's breathing holes, and its warmth rises in a tiny shimmer above the rim. You watch these carriers as they move, each one heading toward a designated spot where a new fire will be lit for the night. The first tender stops at a ring of stones set in the open space near the chief's large tent at the camp center. He kneels, places the clay pot on the ground, and carefully tips it so the ember rolls onto a small nest of dry grass mixed with shredded bark. Leaning close, he blows a steady, soft stream of air, his cheeks rounding and hollowing with a rhythm that is both practiced and patient. The grass smokes, a thin white wisp, and then a tiny flame uncurls like a waking animal. He feeds it with twigs and then a piece of dried dung, and the fire catches properly, a modest orange flicker that begins to illuminate the curved felt wall behind it. This first flame, though small, is a signal. Almost at once, other fires begin to appear across the camp, each one lit with the same careful, unhurried ceremony. You observe the pattern from your stool, the way the little blazes seem to bloom out of the ground one by one. To the left, near a family tent where you saw a woman's shadow earlier, a boy crouches with his own clay pot, his movements a mirror of his father's that you saw moments ago. The fire he lights is smaller, a child's responsibility, but it glows with the same steady warmth. Further left along the northern edge, two older boys work together, one shielding the infant flame with his cupped hand, while the other arranges larger fuel around it. On the southern side, where the supply carts are drawn up, a solitary man with grey in his beard coaxes a fire from what looks like almost nothing, just a handful of dry horse dung and a few splinters of wood, and in less than a minute the little pile is crackling cheerfully. The whole process is carried out with a quiet attention that feels like a prayer spoken without words, a ritual so old that the hands know it better than the mind. You shift slightly on the stool, drawing the felt cloak closer as the air cools, and watch the camp transform in the new light. The flames are still young and tentative, each one a small tongue of yellow and blue at the base, and together they cast a low, warm radiance that moves gently across the felt walls of the yurts. The smoke holes on top of the tents catch this illumination in faint outline, and the whole camp seems to breathe out light. The horses at the picket line, which before were only dark shapes, now appear as soft silhouettes with details just suggested: the curve of a neck, the flick of an ear, the gentle sway of a tail. They stand with one hind hoof tipped, resting, indifferent to the fires, but bathed in the same amber glow that makes their coats look like burnished metal. From where you sit, the smell of the fires changes moment by moment. At first there is a sharp, acrid tang as the dry grass and dung ignite, a smell like the essence of summer stored in fiber and released as heat. Then, as the first flames settle and the embers form a bed of coals, someone adds a handful of dried herbs to one of the central fires, perhaps wild sage, or the grey-leafed fragrant plant that grows near the spring, and the smoke shifts into something mellower, sweeter, a scent that drifts across the camp and enters your nose with a kind of gentle sweetness. The new smell mixes with the ever-present wool scent of the tents and the faint animal musk from the herds, creating a layered perfume that is the signature of a settled evening. You draw a deep breath through your nose, letting the air fill your lungs, and it brings a sensation of comfort that has no name. The fires are placed not randomly, but according to a design that you have known since childhood. You note their positions now, mapping the camp in your mind as you do each night. At the very center, the chief's larger tent glows from two fires, one on the east side and one on the west, their light marking his dwelling as the heart of the community. Around it, in a loose ring, the family hearths flicker, each one tied to a particular tent and a particular lineage. The tent of your mother's brother has a fire that burns with a bright, clear flame, fueled by dry dung gathered from the upper pasture. The tent of the old widow, whose grandchildren are now grown, has a smaller, quieter fire that seems content with just a few coals. Beyond these domestic blazes, the outer ring of the camp is defined by the carts and the supply-filled packs, and there, at intervals, smaller watchfires are lit, not for cooking or warmth, but simply to push back the darkness a little further into the steppe. Your gaze travels from the center outward, following the path of a boy who carries an ember to a cart on the western edge. The cart itself is a solid wooden thing with high sides and a covering of oiled felt, and the boy sets his clay pot on the ground before it, coaxing a fire to life that will burn near the stored felt rolls and spare saddle frames. This fire, like the others, rises in a straight column of smoke, because the wind is almost completely absent. The smoke ascends without wavering, a pale grey line against the darkening sky, and at a certain height it dissolves invisibly into the upper air. All across the camp, these pillars of smoke rise in vertical columns, some thin as threads, others thicker and more substantial, each one marking a hearth like a slow-motion flag. The stillness of the evening holds the smoke in place long enough that the entire camp appears crowned with a canopy of soft, drifting haze. The sky above the smoke continues to deepen. What was a deep, dusty violet now becomes a rich, velvety indigo, and the stars that began to appear earlier are now fully present, sharp and uncountable. The great powder trail of the Milky Way stretches overhead, its billions of faint lights so densely packed that they seem to form a glowing river. You recognize not names, but the patterns that your people use to read the seasons, the great curve of the herding route, the tight cluster like a mare with foals at her side, the lonely bright guide star that marks the cold season's approach. All these are in their familiar places. Tonight the guide star sits low in the northeast, a signal that summer still holds the land, though the coolness of the evening promises change. The smoke columns, faintly lit by the firelight from below, seem to merge with the stars at their tops, as if the camp is sending small offerings of warmth into the vastness. You take a sip from your water skin, letting the metal-cool liquid ease your throat, and return your attention to the fires. The initial sharp crackle of the lighting phase has now subsided, and the blazes have settled into a more constant, humming glow. The flames themselves are small and steady, licking at the dung pats with a patient, repetitive motion, their bases a bed of bright coals that pulse with a deep orange light. The color of the light is not uniform. It shifts subtly from fire to fire, depending on the fuel and the draft. Some fires burn with a yellow-white center surrounded by a blue fringe. Others are more a soft amber overall, and a few, where greenish dried shrubs have been added, show a fleeting tint of turquoise at the edge of the coals. These variations are a quiet entertainment for a guard who must sit and watch for hours, a shifting pattern that never exactly repeats. The men and boys who lit the fires have now mostly retreated into their tents, their task complete. Only a few remain outside, crouching beside a fire to adjust a pot or to add a final piece of fuel. One woman emerges from a tent carrying a small bronze vessel, which she sets on the coals near her door. You watch the way the firelight catches the metal, making it gleam like a tiny sun. She stays a moment, poking the embers with a stick, then rises and goes back inside, the flap falling closed behind her. The fires, now left to themselves, continue to burn with a quiet self-sufficiency, as if they are living things that need only a little care to keep their promise through the night. The sense of the camp as a single unified shape comes strongly to you now. From your stool at the eastern edge, you see the whole arrangement as an oval of light in the dark sea of the steppe. The fires define the boundaries, the central blaze near the chief's tent, the ring of family hearths, the outer watchfires at the carts. The felt tents themselves, lit from without and faintly glowing from the residual embers of internal hearths, look like large, rounded lanterns. The spaces between them are soft with shadow, not dark in an absolute sense but dim, holding a gentle twilight made by the indirect spread of the flames. It is a landscape of light and texture, and you, sitting at its edge, are both part of it and separate, a silent witness. You think about how many times this exact ritual has been carried out in this same place or in places just like it. The clay pots that carry the embers are made from the mud of a riverbank 3 days' ride to the west. The hands that shape them are old and cracked. The dung that fuels the fires comes from the very cattle you guard. Everything is connected in a circle of use and reuse. Nothing wasted, nothing foreign. The smoke that rises from the camp tonight will drift over the steppe and settle eventually, adding a minute particle of ash to the soil, and next year the grass that grows there will be eaten by the herd, and the dung will be gathered and dried and burned again. This thought is not a conscious one, but a felt understanding, a texture of the mind that comes from living with these cycles. The dog at your feet stirs, lifts its head, and yawns hugely, its tongue curling. It smells the herbs in the smoke too, perhaps, or maybe it simply senses the deepening peace of the hour. It turns once on its spot and settles again, its back pressing against your calf. The warmth of the animal seeps through the felts of your boots, a small, simple comfort. You rest one hand on its flank, feeling the rise and fall of its ribs with each breath, and for a moment you close your eyes, just listening. The sound of the fires is a soft, continuous murmur, like wind in dry leaves, punctuated occasionally by the pop of a resin pocket in the wood or the collapse of a dung pat into a bed of coals. Behind that, the fainter sounds of the steppe, the distant call of a nightjar, the almost inaudible rustle of grass stirring. When you open your eyes again, the scene before you is unchanged. The fires still holding steady, the stars still holding steady, the stars still fixed in their slow rotation. Now the last ember carrier, an older boy with a clay pot now empty and cool, walks back toward the main tent. His job is done, and he moves without hurry, his figure crossing the illuminated spaces between fires. You watch his progress as he passes near your position, and he glances your way, raising a hand in a quiet gesture of acknowledgement. You lift your own hand in reply, and then he is gone, ducking into a tent. The camp is fully lit now, a constellation of firelight to match the constellation overhead, and the watch settles into its long, quiet middle phase. You scan the horizon one more time, left to north, center, right to south. The dark is deeper now, and the little watchfire you will tend later still burns low beside your stool. You turn slightly and place a single dry dung pat onto its coals, nudging it with your staff until it sits firmly. The flame takes hold, and the light beside you brightens a little, pushing the shadows back a small distance. The smell of the fresh fuel joins the general perfume of the camp, and you settle once more into stillness. The straight columns of smoke continue to rise, straight as the trunks of birch trees, their tops fading into the starry sky. They mark the presence of each fire with a faithful stillness, and you find yourself following one column upward with your eyes until it vanishes among the constellations. The guide star glints through a thin haze of smoke, its light slightly softened, and you note how the herding route curve now points almost directly at it. These are the signs that structure the night, the silent language of sky and fire that tells you the world is in order. The camp sleeps behind you, held in a net of gentle light, and the first deep hour of your watch moves forward as it always does, second by second, in the company of the steady flames. Beyond the ring of carts and the last low watchfire, the land opens into the grazing grounds that the camp has claimed for this season. You shift your weight on the stool and turn your head slowly, letting your gaze travel outward across the darkened plain. The firelight at your back means your eyes must adjust, and they do, the faint shapes emerging from the blackness like stones revealed by a dropping tide. What was only a suggestion of movement resolves into the solid presence of the animals, the night herd that is the true wealth of the camp, its breathing treasure spread across the short grass. Nearest to the camp edge lies the small stock, the sheep and goats kept inside a temporary pen made of felt-covered hurdles. The hurdles are light frames of willow branches lashed together, and during the day they are moved as the animals graze, but at night they form a circle that holds the flock close. You can see the soft pale forms of the sheep pressed together inside this enclosure, their fleeces catching what little light comes from the stars and the distant campfires, so that they seem to glow with a faint, pearly luminescence. They lie in a dense mass, their bodies touching, the lambs tucked in among the ewes. Now and then a shape stirs, a head lifts, a pair of pale ears swivels forward to catch some tiny sound, and then the head sinks down again. The goats are darker, smaller, some of them lying on the outside of the group, with their legs folded neatly under them, like cats. One old billy goat with ridged horns stands apart, alert but not alarmed, his eyes catching a glint of starsheen. He turns his head toward you as if sensing your attention, then resumes his motionless vigil. The pen is quiet except for the continuous small sounds of breathing and the occasional rustle of a fleece rubbing against another fleece. A lamb bleats, a high thin note that quavers in the night air, and a ewe answers with a low grumbling call that seems to say everything is all right. The lamb, satisfied, stops. The brief exchange hangs for a moment, and then the stillness rolls back over the flock. The sound of so many animals breathing together is a soft, oceanic hush, a sound so constant that it becomes a kind of silence in itself. Beyond the sheep pen, in a looser grouping that spreads across a slight rise in the land, the larger cattle rest for the night. These are the beasts that pull the carts, the yaks and the humped cattle with their shaggy winter coats already beginning to grow in. You see them as darker masses against the faint silver of the grass, great recumbent shapes like small hills that have shifted their positions for the night. Some lie with their legs folded beneath them, heads extended flat along the ground. Others rest in a more upright posture, their heads swaying slightly as they chew their cud in a slow, grinding rhythm that never quite stops. The sound of this chewing is a soft, wet noise, a steady chuff and grind that drifts to you in irregular waves, as soothing as a mill wheel turning in a dream. One cow, a large brindled animal with a crooked left horn that you recognize from the daytime, exhales heavily through her nostrils, a great gust of air that blows a small puff of dust from the ground in front of her. The sound is deep and unhurried, the sound of complete relaxation, and after the breath is released, she settles her head more deeply against the earth. A calf lies beside her, a smaller version of the same coloring, pressed close to her flank for warmth. Neither animal moves again. They are fixed in place like stones, their sleep so profound that you can almost feel its weight from where you sit. Farther out still, on the open steppe where the grass grows a little taller and the ground is not trampled flat, the horses graze. They are not penned or tethered, but wear simple hobbles of braided leather around their front legs, enough to slow any sudden movement, but not to prevent the steady, inch-by-inch progress of grazing. You can see them as silhouettes against the slightly lighter horizon, their shapes distinctly equine, necks arched down to the grass, tails swishing idly. The hobbles make a soft clinking sound as the horses shift from one patch of grass to another, a faint chime-like distant bells heard through a fog. The rhythm of their grazing is a pattern of small steps, a pause, the cropping sound of grass torn clean by teeth, then more steps, another pause. This cycle repeats itself over and over, the horses moving across the plain with the slow, undirected purposefulness of clouds crossing a sky. You watch one horse in particular, a grey mare with a dark mane that hangs in a thick rope down her neck. She moves a few steps, the hobble leathers creaking softly, then drops her head and tears a mouthful of grass with a crisp, tearing sound. She chews, her jaw moving sideways in that characteristic rotary motion, and while she chews, she stands utterly still, her eyes half closed, her ears loose and relaxed. Then she swallows, takes another step, and repeats the whole cycle without variation. The sight of her is so calm, so completely without urgency, that you find your own breathing slowing further to match the pace of her grazing. Now you decide to stretch your legs. The watch requires not only sitting but also movement, a slow circuit of the eastern flank to ensure that all remains as it should be. You rise from the stool, your knees and hips making small sounds of protest that are quickly absorbed by the night, and you begin to walk. The ground underfoot is firm, the short grass springing back after each step, and you place your feet carefully, rolling from heel to toe to avoid the heavy tread that might alarm the animals. Your felt boots make only a soft brushing sound against the earth. The dog lifts its head as you stand, considers whether to follow, and then settles back with a sigh, choosing sleep over the slow patrol. You walk first toward the sheep pen. As you approach, the animals near the edge of the flock sense your presence and stir slightly, a ripple of awareness that passes through the mass of white bodies without any real alarm. A few ewes lift their heads and look at you, with their pale, horizontal pupilled eyes, the expression in them as blank and calm as the face of the moon. They see that you are only the guard, the same figure they have seen countless times before, and they lower their heads again, dismissing you from their attention. You pause at the hurdle fence, your hand resting on a smooth willow pole, and look in at the flock. The lambs are almost invisible, buried among the ewes. You count what you can see of them by the small heads tucked under fleeces, the tiny ears that flick now and then. All are present, all are quiet. The billy goat watches you, but does not move, and after a long moment he closes his eyes, a sign of complete trust. You move on, walking a slow curve that takes you past the cattle. Your path skirts their loose grouping at a distance that allows them to remain undisturbed. The night is cool enough now that a faint mist rises from the damp ground near a slight depression, and the cattle lying there seem to float on a shallow sea of silver vapor. The brindled cow does not stir as you pass, nor does her calf. Their breathing continues in the same deep, slow tempo, and their bodies radiate a mild animal heat that you can feel as you walk downwind of them, a ghost of warmth on the cool air. The bull, a massive dark shape separate from the cows, lies with his great head resting on a hummock of grass. His horns sweep out in a wide curve, their points just visible against the sky. He too is asleep, his massive sides rising and falling with the regularity of a blacksmith's bellows. You count the cattle as you pass, the bull, the brindled cow and her calf, the old white ox, 3 other cows, 2 young heifers. All present, all at peace. Now you turn your steps outward, toward the horses. Here the ground is less trampled, and the grass brushes against the hem of your cloak with a whispering sound. The horses are scattered across a wider area, some near, some farther. You walk toward the grey mare you were watching earlier, your path angling so that you will not startle her. She notices you coming, her ears pricking forward, and she pauses in her chewing, a mouthful of grass hanging from her lips like an untidy moustache. You stop a respectful distance away and stand still. The mare snorts once, a soft flutter of breath, and then returns to her meal, her ears relaxing again. The hobbles on her front legs are in good condition, the leather smooth and unbroken. You note that the knots are still tight, the braiding intact. Beside her, a young colt lies flat on its side in the grass, so completely asleep that it looks more like a fallen piece of felt than a living animal. Its legs are stretched out, its head tilted back so that its throat is exposed, and its sides barely move with shallow, rapid breaths. The colt is young, born only this spring, and its coat is still woolly and soft. Seeing it so deeply asleep, utterly vulnerable and utterly safe, brings a quiet sense of rightness, a satisfaction that has no words. The mare grazes on, the colt dreams on, and you watch them for a long moment before moving on. You continue your patrol, walking a wide arc that takes in the full eastern sweep of the grazing ground. The land here is gently rolling, its dips and rises revealed by the faint starlight. The moon, a slender waning crescent, now hangs low in the sky to the southeast, its light a thin silver wash that does not so much illuminate as suggest. It spreads a delicate sheen over the grass, making the tips of each blade gleam like tiny strands of polished metal, and it picks out the recumbent shapes of the cattle as rounded, dark mounds on a field of faint light. The shadows cast by the moon are soft and long, stretched into indistinct patches that shift as the moon itself moves. You walk through these shadows, your own shadow a tall, thin companion that keeps pace beside you. Far off, at the limit of your vision, a herd of wild saiga antelope moves as a faint disturbance of movement, a ripple of ghostly shapes that appear and then dissolve back into the dark. They are no threat, only fellow travelers on the steppe, and their presence is as natural as the wind. Closer in, a night bird calls from the gully, its 3 descending notes repeating at long intervals. You pause during your walk, to listen, to let the sound locate itself in the landscape. The bird is somewhere down by the dry riverbed, where a few stunted willows grow, and its call is not a cry of alarm, but a simple statement of presence, a marker of territory. Then it stops, and the silence that follows is full of the small sounds of the herd. You have now completed roughly half of your circuit, and you stand at the farthest point from the camp, a spot where the firelight is barely aglow on the horizon behind you. From here, the camp seems a distant orange smudge, low and warm, while all around the steppe spreads out in darkness and silver. The sky overhead is a dense field of stars, their light so bright away from the fires that you can see the color differences between them, the blue-white of the hottest stars, the warm yellow of those like the sun, the rare reddish tint of a cooler giant. The Milky Way pours across the zenith, and its reflected light adds to the moon's wash, so that the grass in front of you is dimly visible for a great distance. You feel the size of the world in these moments, the immense spread of land and sky, and you also feel your own place within it, small but not insignificant, a guard standing watch over a sleeping herd on a quiet night. You turn your steps back toward the camp, retracing your arc, but slightly closer to the cattle this time. As you walk, you notice small details that were invisible from the stool, the way a cow's ear twitches to dislodge a night insect, the pale gleam of a shed tooth lying in the grass near a salt lick, the faint trail of pressed grass that marks where the horses have moved over the past hour. These are the things a guard notices, the evidence of ordinary life, the signs that all is proceeding as it should. The colt you saw earlier has not moved a muscle since you passed. Its mother has grazed a few yards away, and now she stands over it, her head lowered, her warm breath ruffling the colt's coat with each exhalation. She does not wake it. She simply stands guard in her own way, a silent partner to your own watch. The sight of the two of them together, the mare patient and the foal deeply asleep, holds your attention for a long, quiet interval. You think about the trust that allows a young animal to sleep so completely in the open, the trust that comes from a world where threats are rare and the guard is always present. That trust is something you carry as a responsibility, a weight that is not heavy but deeply grounding. You pass the cattle again on your return. The old white ox has shifted slightly since you last saw him. He now lies on his other side, his great humped shoulder rising like a hillock, and his breathing is a low, rumbling sound that you can hear from 10 paces away. The other cows are as they were, their bodies dark islands in the moon-silvered grass. One of the heifers, a restless young animal with a white blaze on her forehead, stirs as you walk by and raises her head to watch you. She chews her cud once, twice, and then her head dips again, the moment of alertness already forgotten. You approach the sheep pen from the other side now, completing a full loop. The flock has rearranged itself slightly in your absence, the tightly packed center shifting outward as one ewe moved and another took her place. The lambs are still hidden, the goats still watchful, the old billy goat now lying down with his bearded chin resting on his front hooves. The felt-covered hurdles creak faintly as the temperature drops, the willow wood contracting with a tiny ticking sound. You stop and lean on the hurdle fence again, your hands resting on the rough felt covering, and you listen. The flock's breathing is a steady, susurrating whisper, a living white noise that blends with the soft cropping of the horses and the deeper breaths of the cattle. This composite sound, the herd at rest, is a kind of music, a low, continuous note that underpins the night. Now your patrol brings you back to your stool. The walk is taken perhaps a quarter of an hour, though time feels different on the watch, stretching and contracting without reference to the star's slow wheel. You settle onto the wooden seat again, adjusting the cloak that had shifted during your walk, and you take a sip of water from the skin. The dog greets your return with a single thump of its tail, without opening its eyes. You look out, once more over the darkened grazing ground, the same scene now layered with the fresh memory of your close observation. Nothing has changed, and nothing needs to change. The herd is settled, the animals are safe. The night is a vast, peaceful pasture. The moon continues its slow crawl toward the horizon, its crescent thinning to a faint silver bow. The mist in the low ground has thickened slightly, forming a shallow lake of white that does not reach the animals, but fills the dips and hollows so that the cattle appear to rest on islands of grass. The effect is dreamlike, a landscape half real and half imagined, and you let your gaze rest on it without focusing, allowing the shapes to blur and soften. Your mind drifts, not into sleep, but into a state of alert restfulness, a calm watchfulness that is the guard's true skill. You hear the mare crop another mouthful of grass, her teeth tearing it with that same crisp sound. You hear the brindled cow exhale again, a long, slow release of air. You hear the lamb bleat once more, a tiny query that is immediately answered. These sounds mark the passage of time in place of any mechanical clock, and you let them come and go without counting them, each one a stitch in the fabric of the night. Eventually, the colt stirs. It lifts its head from the grass, blinks its large dark eyes, and makes a soft nickering sound. The mare answers with a low, guttural noise and moves a step closer. The colt struggles to its feet, all gangly legs and wobbling, and immediately begins to nurse, the sound of it suckling a rapid, rhythmic pull that joins the other night sounds. After a short time, it detaches, yawns, and folds itself back down into the grass, asleep again within moments. The whole episode lasts only a few minutes and changes nothing. It is simply the life of the herd continuing, a small cycle within the larger cycle of the night. Your own eyelids feel heavy, not with the need for sleep, but with the deep relaxation that comes from prolonged stillness. You blink slowly, deliberately, and return your gaze to the horizon line where the steppe meets the starry sky. That line is as still as if drawn with a ruler, a perfect division of earth and heaven, and you follow it from north to south, seeing no interruption, no sign of anything that does not belong. The herd is at rest. The camp is at rest. The world is at rest. Your watch continues. You return to your post after the slow circuit of the herd, and lower yourself onto the wooden stool with the same careful, practiced motion you have used 1,000 times. The stool accepts your weight with a tiny creak that is swallowed instantly by the larger quiet. You settle your cloak around your shoulders again, pulling the front edges so they overlap across your chest, and then you simply sit. The walk has given your muscles a mild warmth, and now that warmth begins to ease into a deeper stillness as your body becomes once more a part of the stationary night. You let your hands rest on your thighs, palms down, and you breathe out a long, slow breath that carries with it the last tension of movement. The watch now enters a phase that is less about scanning the horizon and more about opening your ears to the many soft layers of sound that make up the camp at rest. At first, the quiet seems absolute, a solid wall of silence. But silence on the steppe is never truly empty. It is only the background against which smaller sounds become visible to the ear. You have learned this over many years of night watches, the way the absence of loud noise reveals a whole world of delicate, continuous sound. You let your attention settle into that world now, not straining but simply receiving, as if your ears were open bowls collecting whatever falls into them. The nearest sound is the campfire beside your stool, the small watchfire you fed with a dung pat earlier. It has burned down to a bed of bright coals, and now it speaks in a language of tiny crackles and sighs. A piece of fuel shifts as it burns through, collapsing in on itself with a soft, dry crunch that sends a brief fountain of orange sparks spiraling upward. The sparks rise a short distance, winking out one by one, and the faint hiss they make as they expire is too soft to hear. What you do hear is the almost subaudible whisper of heated air rising, a sound that is more a sensation of pressure in the ears than a true noise. The fire breathes in its own slow rhythm, and your breathing gradually falls into alignment with it. Beyond the fire, from the camp behind you, the first sound that reaches your awareness is the quiet chime of a bronze pot being moved inside a tent. It is a small, accidental note, a single clear ring that hangs in the air for a moment and then fades. Perhaps a woman has moved the pot from one spot to another, lifting it by its handle and setting it down on a felt mat. The bronze has a particular voice, a mellow brightness that carries through the felt walls without being sharp. The note is followed by a soft scrape as the pot is adjusted, and then silence flows back in. You picture the interior of the tent without trying, the warm glow of a tiny oil lamp, the layered carpets on the floor, the sleeping shapes bundled under heavy wool blankets. The sound is a small reminder that even in the deepest night, the camp is not entirely asleep, that other waking presences move quietly within their own small spheres. Now another sound surfaces, this one rhythmic and human, a woman humming a lullaby. The tune is a simple two-note phrase, a rising and falling that repeats without exact repetition, each iteration slightly different in length or inflection. The notes are low, barely above a murmur, and they come from a tent that is 3 dwellings away from your position, slightly to the left. You recognize the voice, but do not attach a name to it. It is the voice of a mother soothing a restless baby. The humming rises on the first note, a soft hum that vibrates in the throat and then falls on the second, a sighing descent that sounds like a small wave receding from a shore. The interval between the 2 notes is a minor third, a melancholy little gap that carries no sadness but only a tender weariness. The lullaby continues for perhaps 2 minutes, the pauses between phrases growing longer as the baby settles, until finally the humming stops altogether, and a deeper silence fills the space it leaves. The baby has fallen asleep, and the mother has perhaps fallen asleep too, still holding the child against her chest. The absence of the lullaby is as much a sound as the lullaby itself, a negative shape in the night's texture. You shift slightly and hear the whisper of felt door flaps being adjusted somewhere to your right. Someone has emerged from a tent or gone back in, pulling the stiff felt panel across the wooden frame. The sound is a low, scraping rustle, like a hand brushing over rough cloth in slow motion. The felt edges drag against each other with a soft friction that lasts only a second or two, and then the flap settles into place with a faint, muffled thump. A figure moves briefly through the firelight, a dark shape that crosses the space between 2 tents and then disappears. There is no call, no greeting. The person is simply attending to some small need of the night, fetching water or adding fuel to a family fire, and then returning to rest. The silence that follows the sound of the flap is deeper than before, as if the night itself has pulled a blanket closer around its shoulders. The dog that accompanied you on your earlier patrol now rises from its spot near the stool, circles once in a tight, shuffling rotation, and settles again with a deep, gusty sigh. The sigh is a sound of pure contentment, a release of air that seems to come from the very bottom of the animal's lungs. Its chin comes to rest on its paws with a slight, fleshy smack, and then its breathing evens out into the soft, continuous rhythm of canine sleep. The dog's presence adds a small, warm soundscape of its own, the occasional twitch of a leg against the dirt, a faint whimper as it chases some dream creature, the rapid flutter of its nostrils as it sniffs the air without waking. These sounds are so familiar that you barely notice them, but they form a grounding layer in the auditory fabric of the night. Now the wind, which has been absent for most of the evening, begins to stir. You feel it first as a subtle change in pressure against your cheek, a coolness that moves across your skin like the lightest touch of a feather. Then you hear it, a low susurration that starts far out on the steppe and gradually draws closer. The sound is not a howl or a whistle. It is the gentlest possible movement of air through the short grass, a sound like water running over smooth stones or silk being drawn slowly across silk. It comes in long, slow waves that rise and fall, peak and recede, each wave a sustained sigh that seems to breathe over the whole plain. As the wind reaches the camp, you hear its interaction with the felt tents, a soft, drumming pressure against the windward walls, a faint rustle of loose edges, the gentle clink of a rope toggle tapping against a wooden lattice. The wind carries with it the scent of dry grass and distant earth, and it passes over you and through you, a cool river of air that wraps around the camp and then moves on, leaving a refreshed stillness in its wake. During a lull in the wind, a night bird calls from far away. The call is 3 descending notes, a clear, liquid sequence that drops through a minor scale, a high note, a middle note, a low note, that trails off into a soft gurgle. The sound travels across the open steppe unimpeded, each note clean and separate, and it seems to come from the direction of the dry riverbed to the south. You listen for the bird's second call, knowing that it often repeats after a long pause. The pause stretches out, filled with the soft crackle of the fire and the distant breathing of the herd. And then the call comes again, the same 3 notes, but slightly softer, as if the bird has turned its head away. Then there is a third call, even fainter, and after that the bird falls silent for good. The silence that follows is not empty, but full, a rich container for the memory of the notes. From within one of the nearer tents, you hear a single cough, a dry, brief sound that is quickly muffled. Someone has turned over in sleep or been briefly awakened by a dry throat. The cough is followed by a low murmur, perhaps a word spoken half in dream, and then the soft rustle of blankets being rearranged. The sound is intimate and small, a tiny domestic event that unfolds in the dark behind felt walls. You note it without thinking, the way you note every small sound, and then you let it go. Now a new layer of sound enters the night, this one from the direction of the herd. The old white ox, the one with the patient eyes and the great humped shoulder, releases a long, low vocalization, a kind of deep-chested moan that vibrates through the air for several seconds. It is not a sound of distress, but a sound of simple presence, a statement that says, "I am here, I am comfortable, all is well." The note is so deep that you feel it as much as you hear it, a faint vibration in your own chest. The sound fades, and the ox shifts its weight, the grass under its enormous body rustling with a heavy, muffled crunch. Then it settles again, and its breathing returns to the slow, steady rhythm that you can almost count. One of the horses adds its own voice to the night, a soft nicker that ripples through the darkness. The nicker is a low, bubbling sound, friendly and curious, and it is answered a moment later by a similar sound from another horse farther out. Perhaps the grey mare has moved closer to her colt, or perhaps 2 mares have touched noses in the dark. The nickers are a quiet conversation, an exchange of small information that has nothing to do with alarm. The sounds fade, and the steady cropping of grass resumes, the horses moving on with their endless slow grazing. Now you become aware of a sound that has been present all along, but that you have not consciously noticed, the collective breathing of the camp. It is not a single sound, but a composite, made up of the breathing of sleeping families in their tents, the softer breathing of children, the rhythmic sighs of the herd, even the low respiratory purr of the dog at your feet. This composite sound rises and falls in a vast slow cycle, like the breath of a single enormous creature that encompasses the entire camp. You let your own breathing join it, inhaling as the wind inhales, exhaling as the fire crackles, and for a long, timeless interval You are simply a pair of ears suspended in a sea of sound. The dog twitches again in its dream, its legs paddling against the ground in a rapid, muffled rhythm. Its claws scrape the dirt with a soft kick, and its tail gives a weak thump, and then it subsides. You reach down and rest your hand on its flank for a moment, feeling the warmth and the life of the animal, and the dog sighs again, a sound of pure peace. Your hand returns to your lap, and you continue to listen. Another small sound, the soft trickle of water being poured from a leather bucket into a smaller vessel. Someone is awake in the tent of the chief, perhaps preparing a nighttime drink or filling a lamp. The trickle is a delicate liquid sound, a brief music that sparkles for a few seconds and then stops. You hear a hand stir the water, a soft sloshing, and then the sound of drinking, a quiet series of swallows. The vessel is set down with a gentle clink, and the tent falls silent again. These tiny domestic sounds are the heartbeat of the camp, the evidence that life continues even in the deepest hours of darkness. The wind returns, this time from a slightly different quarter, and it brings with it a faint, faraway sound that you must listen carefully to identify. It is the sound of a fox barking, a single sharp yelp that is carried on the breeze from perhaps half a mile away. The bark is thin and distant, stripped of any urgency by the distance, and it is followed by a longer, more eerie sound that might be a vixen calling. The calls are remote, part of the wild steppe beyond the camp, and they pose no threat. They are simply the voices of other creatures going about their own nighttime business, as separate from the camp as the stars are from the fires. You let the sounds drift past you without attaching any meaning to them, and after a few moments they cease, leaving only the whisper of the grass. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to sharpen your hearing. With your eyes closed, the sounds become more distinct, the various layers separating out into a kind of auditory map. The fire is a crisp, close presence directly in front of you. The dog's breathing is a soft, living hum near your feet. The faint creak of felt and wood comes from the tents behind you at various distances. The low, rumbling breath of the cattle comes from the left. The skittering crop of the horses comes from the right and farther out. The wind is an all-encompassing movement that flows from behind and wraps around you toward the east. You hold this map in your mind, a complete and peaceful soundscape, and you find that it is deeply soothing, a proof that all is in order and nothing is out of place. When you open your eyes again, the firelight seems a little brighter, the stars a little sharper, and the night a little more intimate. Now there is the sound of a small child crying out in sleep, a single sharp syllable that is immediately hushed by a parent's murmuring voice. The cry is not one of terror, but of some passing dream disturbance, and the parent's response is a low rhythmic shushing that blends with the wind and the fire. The child quiets within seconds, and the shushing tapers off into silence. The whole episode lasts only a few heartbeats, and then the night is whole again. You become aware of the texture of the silence between sounds. It is not a uniform blankness, but a fabric woven of many tiny threads, the distant hum of insects in the grass, so faint that it might be imagination, the almost imperceptible crack of cooling stones, the sigh of embers settling, the gentle pad of a cat walking somewhere near the carts. These micro-sounds are the foundation upon which the larger sounds rest, and they are constant, continuous, a quiet drone that never stops. You let your attention rest on this drone, and you feel your own mind slowing, not toward sleep, but toward a deep, wakeful calm that is the guard's true state. From the direction of the sheep pen there is a brief scuffle as one ewe gets to her feet, turns around, and lies down again. The sound is a soft thump of hooves on packed earth, a rustle of fleece, and a low, grumbling bleat that fades as the ewe settles. The billy goat answers with a single snort, a dismissive puff of air, and then all is quiet again. You picture the sheep as a mass of pale wool, their breath steaming slightly in the cool air, and you know that they are safe inside their felt hurdle pen. Now your own body makes a sound. A soft sigh escapes your lips, a release of air that you did not consciously decide to make. The sigh is a sign of the deep relaxation that has settled into your muscles and bones, a relaxation that comes from the combination of stillness, rhythmic breathing, and the comforting certainty that all is well. You do not fight this relaxation, you allow it to spread through you, from your shoulders down to your hands, from your hips down to your feet. Your grip on the staff loosens slightly, and your head bows just a fraction of an inch, not in sleep, but in a kind of reverent attention to the quiet. The stars continue their slow wheel overhead, and the camp continues its quiet respiration of small sounds. The wind has died down again, and now the air is so still that you can hear the soft plop of a piece of dung fuel crumbling into the fire, each fragment falling with a tiny, distinct sound. The dog stretches in its sleep, extending its front legs and curling its toes, and then it resettles with a contented grunt. The night bird calls once more, very far away now, its 3 notes a fading echo of the earlier call. You receive each of these sounds as a gift, a small offering from the night, and you let them pass through you, without grasping, without analyzing. A new sound, unexpected but not startling, a distant flute-like call from somewhere high overhead. It is a flock of cranes or perhaps geese, migrating under the cover of darkness, their voices drifting down from an invisible height. The calls are thin, reedy notes that overlap and interweave, a wandering thread of music that moves across the sky from north to south. You tilt your head back and search the stars, but you cannot see the birds. They are too high, their bodies dark against the dark. The sound grows louder for a moment, a chorus of small, wild voices, and then it begins to fade, receding into the sudden distance, until it is swallowed entirely by the vastness. The silence that returns feels even larger than before, a silence that stretches all the way to the edge of the world. You take another sip from your water skin, the cool liquid a small shock of sensation against the warmth of the fire. The water makes a gentle glugging sound as you tilt the skin, and the stopper squeaks faintly when you replace it. These small deliberate sounds, made by your own hand, remind you that you are an active presence in the night, not just a passive receiver, but a participant in its quiet unfolding. You are the guard, and your listening is a form of protection, a net of attention that holds the camp safe. Now, for a long stretch of time, nothing changes. The fire burns on in its steady, whispering way. The dog dreams, the herd breathes, the tents creak softly. No new sound enters the night. The existing sounds simply continue, layer upon layer, a slow-motion symphony that has no climax and no resolution. You sit in the middle of this symphony, and you feel your awareness expanding to encompass it all, the near and the far, the loud and the soft, the continuous and the intermittent. The boundaries between yourself and the sounds blur, and you become, for a time, simply the act of listening. The moon, a thin crescent now very low in the southeast, casts a final pale light before it sinks below the horizon. The mist in the low ground thickens as the temperature drops further and the world takes on a softer edge. Sounds are slightly muffled now, the mist acting as a blanket that absorbs and diffuses. The crackle of the fire seems a little more distant, the breathing of the herd a little more hushed. The night is entering its deepest, stillest phase, the hours when even the insects pause, and the earth itself seems to hold its breath. You adjust your cloak again, pulling the hood up so that it frames your face and traps a pocket of warm air around your ears. The felt is soft and slightly scratchy against your skin, and it carries the smell of lanolin and smoke, a smell as familiar as your own name. Inside the hood, the sounds of the night are slightly altered, the higher frequencies dampened, so that the world sounds even calmer, more subdued. You settle into this new auditory space, and you continue to listen, your attention unwavering, your body still, your breath slow. The camp sleeps on, wrapped in its cocoon of small sounds, and you keep the watch, a silent listener at the edge of the dark. The deepest part of the night arrives without announcement, a gradual thickening of the darkness that has been building since dusk. You had been sitting for what feels like a long, smooth stretch of time, your body still, your breathing slow, and now you notice that the sky overhead has completed its transformation from the pale blue of early evening to a profound, velvety black that seems to have no bottom. The stars, which appeared one by one in the first hours, are now fully present in their countless thousands, a dense field of light that covers every inch of the celestial dome from horizon to horizon. You tilt your head back, letting the hood of your cloak fall away from your ears, and you look up into the vastness with the quiet attention that the watch has taught you. The steppe sky at night is a thing that never grows old. You have seen it in every season, under every phase of the moon, in clear weather and in mist, and each time it presents itself as a new arrangement of the same eternal elements. Tonight the moon has set, leaving the stars to rule alone, and they do so with a brilliance that makes the campfires seem like timid imitations. The Milky Way draws its great powdery arc directly overhead, a river of light so dense in places that the individual stars blur together into a continuous glowing band. You have always thought of this band as a trail of dust kicked up by a vast sky herd moving between pastures, a celestial echo of the trails your own herds leave on the steppe. The thought is not a conscious myth but a quiet association, a way of placing yourself within the pattern. You begin to trace the familiar star groups with your eyes, not naming them, but recognizing their shapes as you would recognize the faces of old friends. To the north, the great curve of the herding route hangs low, its 7 bright stars arranged in a sweeping arc that mirrors the bend of the river where you camped 2 summers ago. The curve points always toward the guide star, the bright, steady light that sits in the northeast tonight, pulsing faintly as if it were a heartbeat in the sky. The guide star is the one your people use to mark the approach of the cold season. When it rises earlier and earlier each night, the time for moving south is near. Tonight it sits at a comfortable height, a reassurance that summer still holds the land, that the frosts of autumn are still weeks away. You let your gaze rest on it for a long moment, feeling its light enter your eyes with a cool, steady pressure. Near the guide star, the tight cluster like a mare with foals glitters in the middle distance. This group is small and dense, a knot of stars that requires a relaxed eye to see properly. When you look directly at it, the cluster seems to dim and recede, but when you look just to one side, it flares into brightness, revealing the tiny points that surround the central core like foals pressing close to their mother. You have watched this cluster on countless nights, and you have noticed how its position shifts with the seasons, how in spring it stands directly over the eastern horizon at midnight, how in autumn it grazes the northern rim. Tonight it is high, almost at the zenith, and its light seems particularly clear. To the south, a long, straggling line of stars marks what the elders call the Old Woman's Spindle, a faint trail that winds through a region of dimmer stars and ends in a bright, solitary point. The Spindle is a winter constellation, but its first stars are beginning to appear now, a whisper of the cold to come. You follow its path with your eyes, tracing the faint dots from their origin near the horizon up to the bright endpoint, and you note that the line has grown a little longer since you last paid attention to it a week ago. The sky is a slow clock, its hands moving across weeks and months, and you read it not with numbers, but with a deep, accumulated sense of change. Above the western horizon, a scattering of stars forms no particular shape, but reminds you of the pattern of sheep on a hillside, random, but somehow ordered, each point of light a separate animal grazing on the dark pasture of the sky. This region of the heavens is less bright than the Milky Way, sparser and more peaceful, and your eyes linger there as they might linger on a quiet corner of the grazing grounds. The stars in the west twinkle more than those overhead, their light passing through a thicker layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and the twinkling gives them a lively, shimmering quality that contrasts with the steady, unwinking light of the stars at the zenith. You lower your gaze briefly to rest your eyes, and in that moment a meteor traces a silent white line across the northern sky. It appears without warning, a thin, bright scratch on the dark surface, and it moves so quickly that it is gone before a full thought can form. The trail it leaves behind fades almost instantly, a ghost of light that dissolves into the blackness. Meteors are common on clear nights, and you have seen hundreds of them over the years, but each one still draws a moment of silent attention. This one was particularly bright, with a faint greenish tint at its head, and it seemed to point toward the guide star before it vanished. You continue watching the spot where it disappeared, and a few seconds later, another, fainter meteor crosses a different part of the sky, this one shorter and dimmer, a mere flicker at the edge of vision. Then the sky returns to its steady, stellar quiet. The vastness of the steppe sky has a particular effect on the mind during a long watch. It makes the world below seem small and still, but not in a way that diminishes. Rather, the smallness feels like a safe enclosure, a cozy camp held in the palm of something immense and gentle. You feel the curve of the earth beneath you, the way the steppe stretches out flat to every horizon, and above you the stars curve in a matching dome, so that you are suspended between two great bowls, one of grass and one of light. The sensation is one of perfect balance, a harmony of scale that makes your small watch feel both tiny and fully sufficient. You are a single point of consciousness in the center of a vast, ordered universe, and that is exactly where you are meant to be. The Milky Way continues its slow rotation, though the movement is too gradual to see. You know that over the course of the night, the great band of stars will pivot around the guide star, swinging from its current high arc down toward the western horizon by dawn. The knowledge is not something you calculate, but something you feel in your bones. A sense of the sky's rhythm that comes from a lifetime of sleeping under its changes and waking to its new configurations. The sky is the only clock the steppe needs, and you are fluent in its language. Now you notice a particular star low in the east that seems brighter than it was an hour ago. This is the morning star. Though morning is still far away, it has just begun its rise, and its light is a clear, piercing white that cuts through the lower atmosphere with a steady, unwinking brilliance. The morning star is a herald, a promise that the sun will return, and you greet its appearance with a quiet nod, a small acknowledgement of the cycle that continues. The star will climb higher over the next few hours, and by the time dawn begins to pale the sky, it will be a blazing beacon above the eastern horizon. For now, it is simply a bright new presence, a fresh note in the sky's silent music. Your eyes move from the morning star back to the zenith, and you let your gaze go soft, taking in the whole sweep of the sky at once. The effect is like looking into a deep well filled with light, a well that has no bottom. The longer you look, the more stars seem to appear, fainter and fainter points that fill the gaps between the brighter lights until the entire sky is a continuous, shimmering fabric. Some of these faint stars are not stars at all, but distant clusters and clouds of light, the faraway fires of other camps that are too remote to see as anything but a soft glow. You have heard traders speak of these distant lights, calling them the campfires of the sky people, but you know they are simply more of the same vast pattern, more stars in a sky that has room for infinite stars. The mist that thickened in the low ground earlier has now spread slightly, a thin, transparent veil that softens the stars near the horizon. The lowest stars appear to float on a pale silver lake, their light diffused and gentle, while the stars overhead remain sharp and distinct. The contrast between the two zones gives the sky a layered depth, a sense of near and far that makes the heavens seem even larger. The mist carries a faint, clean smell, a mixture of damp earth and cool air, and it brushes against your face with a moisture so fine that it feels like the memory of rain. A night bird calls again from the gully, its three descending notes cutting through the stillness with a clarity that seems to come from directly beneath the stars. The call is a single isolated event, and after it fades, the sky resumes its silent reign. You imagine the bird standing on a willow branch, its head tilted to look at the same stars you are looking at, and the shared observation creates a thin thread of connection between you and the wild creature. Then the bird falls silent and the thread dissolves. You become aware of the sound of the campfires behind you, a soft, continuous whisper that blends with the silence of the stars. The fires are a terrestrial echo of the sky, their flames and embers a small, warm constellation mapped onto the earth. You turn your head slightly and look back at the camp. The fires have burned down further now, most of them reduced to glowing beds of coals that cast a dim, ruddy light on the surrounding tents. The chief's fire still shows a small flame, a single tongue of yellow that dances slowly, and the watch fires at the carts are steady orange points. From this angle, the camp really does look like a reflection of the sky, a scattered cluster of earthly stars that mirror the celestial ones above. The tents are dark, rounded shapes, like low hills, and the smoke from the fires rises in thin, pale columns that fade into the starfield. The image holds for a long, calm moment, and then you turn back to face the eastern steppe. Now the guide star has shifted slightly, its position relative to the herding route curve a little more advanced than before. The movement is almost imperceptible, but you have been watching long enough to sense it, a faint rotation that tells you the night is progressing as it should. The tight cluster, like a mare with foals, has moved past the zenith and now begins its descent toward the west, while new stars rise in the east to take its place. The morning star is noticeably higher, its light even brighter, and now a second bright star has appeared below it, a smaller companion that is just clearing the horizon. The sky is in constant, silent motion, a great wheel turning on an invisible axis, and you are the still point at its center. You take a sip from your water skin and feel the cool liquid slide down your throat. The act of swallowing is a small, grounding sensation that brings your awareness back to your body for a moment. You notice that your neck is slightly stiff from looking upward, and you roll your head gently from side to side, feeling the vertebrae click softly. Then you return your gaze to the sky, which has not paused or changed in any dramatic way, but which continues its slow, majestic rotation. The Milky Way now arches from northeast to southwest, its brightest section almost overhead. You can see the dark patches within it, the regions where cosmic dust blocks the light of the stars behind, creating shapes of shadow that some people call the dark horse or the serpent. To you, these dark patches look like the gaps between clouds of dust on a herd trail, the empty spaces where the animals have already passed. The stars themselves are the dust still hanging in the air, a luminous haze that marks the passage of the celestial herd. The image is so vivid in your mind that you can almost see the great shadowy forms of sky cattle moving across the Milky Way, their hooves kicking up the glowing particles that will become new stars. The thought fades as thoughts do on a long watch, dissolving into the general flow of perception. You are no longer thinking about the stars, you are simply seeing them, receiving their light without naming or categorizing. The sky is a pure visual field, a wash of light and dark that fills your awareness with a quiet, steady radiance. The experience is meditative, a state of open attention that is neither focused nor unfocused, but balanced perfectly between the two. You could sit like this for hours, and indeed you have sat like this for hours, and the sky would continue to hold your gaze with its endless peaceful variation. A faint flicker of lightning appears far to the north, a silent, distant pulse of light that illuminates the edge of a distant cloud bank. The lightning is too far away to hear. It is simply a brief white glow that blooms and fades, and then another flicker follows, and another, a slow, irregular rhythm of light that plays out on the very rim of the world. The storm, if it is a storm, is many miles away, moving across some other part of the steppe, and its light show is a gentle entertainment that adds a new texture to the night. The flickers continue for several minutes, each one illuminating the northern sky with a soft, diffuse glow that momentarily dims the stars in that region. Then the flickers stop, and the stars reclaim their full brightness. You think about the other watchers who have sat under this same sky, the generations of guards who have kept the night watch over the herds of your people. The sky they saw was essentially the same sky you see now. The stars have not moved in any span of time that matters to a human life. The guide star shone for them as it shines for you. The herding route curve pointed the same way. The Milky Way arched across the same expanse. The thought connects you to a long, unbroken chain of watchers, a lineage of stillness and attention that stretches back into a past too distant to imagine. You feel the presence of those earlier guards as a faint, supportive warmth, a sense of company that transcends time. The dog at your feet shifts in its sleep and lets out a soft, dreamy bark, a muffled woof that is clearly addressed to some phantom creature in its mind. The sound brings a small smile to your face, and you reach down to pat its side. The dog's tail thumps once without waking, and then it settles deeper into its dream. You return your hand to your lap and look up again. The sky has not changed, yet it has also changed completely. The stars are in new positions. The morning star is higher. The Milky Way has swung a little further west. The night is passing in its quiet, inevitable way, and you are its witness. Now the cold begins to make itself felt more keenly. The temperature has been dropping steadily since the moon set, and now a faint frost begins to form on the grass around your stool. You can see it as a delicate silver rime that catches the starlight, a dusting of tiny crystals that sparkle with a cold blue-white fire. The frost spreads slowly, advancing across the blades of grass like a silent tide, and the air takes on a crisp, sharp edge that stings your nostrils slightly when you inhale. You pull your cloak tighter and adjust the hood so that it covers your ears fully. The cold is not unpleasant, it is bracing and clean, a reminder that the world is alive and moving through its cycles. The stars seem even brighter now, their light intensified by the cold, dry air. The guide star pulses with a steady diamond clarity, and the morning star blazes in the east like a small, cold sun. The tight cluster like a mare with foals is now descending toward the west, its faint outer stars barely visible, while a new group of stars has risen in the east, a loose, scattered pattern that reminds you of a flock of birds taking flight. You watch this new group for a while, noting how its brightest stars form a rough triangle, and then you let your gaze drift back to the Milky Way, which continues its slow, majestic sweep across the sky. The night is more than half gone now, though you do not measure it in hours. The stars have told you all you need to know about the passage of time, and they continue to tell it, their silent message written in the slow rotation of the celestial sphere. You settle deeper into your cloak, feeling the warmth of your own body trapped within the layers of felt, and you let the sky fill your vision with its endless, calming light. The watch continues, and you're content to sit beneath the stars, a quiet guardian under the great dome of the Steppe night. Somewhere in the deep middle of the night, when the stars have wheeled through a quarter of their slow rotation, and the campfires have settled into steady, glowing hearts of ember, you notice a change in the air. It comes first, not as a sound or a sensation, but as a subtle shift in the way the smoke rises from the nearest watchfire. The column of pale grey, which has been climbing straight as a birch trunk into the dark sky, suddenly wavers, bending slightly at its midpoint and then straightening again. A moment later, the smoke leans more decisively, streaming out toward the west in a flat, thin ribbon before dissipating. The wind, which has been a barely perceptible northerly drift for most of the night, is changing its mind. You feel the new direction on your left cheek a few seconds after you see it in the smoke. The air that touches your skin now carries a different quality, a faint dampness that was not there before. It comes from the east, from the direction of the faraway marshes and the distant river that winds through the low country beyond the horizon. The touch of this eastern breeze is cooler than the previous northern drift, but also softer, less dry, as if the air has been stored in a moist cellar and only now released. You turn your head slightly, presenting your face more fully to the new wind, and you inhale through your nose, searching for the scents it might carry. There is a hint of water in it, a clean green smell like the mud of the riverbank, and beneath that a faint sweetness of distant flowering reeds. The smell is so faint that it might be imagination, but it persists, and you accept it as a small gift from the faraway wetlands. The wind strengthens by slow degrees, never becoming forceful, but gaining enough presence to make the campfires lean and flutter in unison. You watch the nearest family hearth, a modest blaze near the tent of the old widow, and you see how the flames respond to the new breeze. They dip toward the west, their yellow tips stretching out horizontally for a heartbeat, and then they recover, snapping back upright before dipping again. The rhythm is irregular, a soft dancing sway that makes the fire seem like a living creature adjusting its posture to the weather. The coals at the base of the fire glow more intensely when the wind blows across them, a deep, pulsing orange that flares and fades, flares and fades. A few sparks are lifted from the ember bed and carried a short distance before they die, tiny orange motes that vanish into the darkness like brief, earth-bound stars. You adjust your own position on the stool, turning your shoulders slightly so that the wind strikes you at an angle rather than full in the face. Your felt cloak, which has been hanging in heavy still folds, now stirs against your body, its edges lifting and settling with a soft, rhythmic motion. You pull the hood forward a little more, bringing its rim down to shade your eyes, not because the wind is uncomfortable, but because the small adjustment gives you a sense of shelter. Inside the hood, the sound of the wind is muted, reduced to a low, hollow murmur that wraps around your ears like a second layer of felt. The warmth of your own breath collects in the enclosed space, a small pocket of comfort against the cooling air. Now the wind reaches the camp in a more organized way, a steady flow that moves through the felt tents and the wooden carts with a gentle, probing pressure. You hear its effects before you see them, a soft patting sound as a loose door flap is tugged and released, a faint creak from a wooden cart frame as the wind presses against its side, the silky whisper of the grass beyond the camp edge, bending under the new breeze. The smoke holes on top of the yurts, which have been releasing their columns straight upward, now emit smoke that is immediately caught and carried sideways, so that each tent seems to trail a long, pale banner toward the west. The banners overlap and merge, creating a thin haze at the level of the tent roofs, a ghostly canopy that shimmers in the firelight. A few of the horses at the distant picket line react to the wind's change with small movements. You see one dark shape lift its head from the grass and point its ears toward the east, the direction from which the new breeze comes. The horse stands still for a long moment, its nostrils flaring as it reads the scents on the air, and then it shakes its head with a brisk rattling motion, its mane flying out in a dart fan before resettling against its neck. The hobble leathers clink softly, and then the horse drops its head back to the grass and resumes its slow, steady grazing. The other horses do not react at all. They have accepted the wind's change as easily as they accept everything else, their deep trust in the steadiness of the world unshaken by a simple shift in the air. The dog at your feet, however, takes a more active interest in the new breeze. It lifts its head from its paws, its nostrils twitching rapidly, and it sniffs the air with a series of short, sharp inhalations. The dog's ears swivel forward, and it lets out a low, thoughtful whine, a sound that is more curiosity than concern. You reach down and rest your hand on its head, feeling the coarse fur between its ears, and the dog's tail gives a single, hesitant thump. After a moment of alertness, the dog decides that the new smell is nothing to worry about. It yawns, a wide, curling yawn that shows its pink tongue and its worn canine teeth, and then it resettles its chin on its paws with a grunt. The wind rustles the thick fur along its back, making a small ridge that waves like grass. You decide that the wind's change warrants a brief patrol, a slow walk around the eastern perimeter, to check that nothing has been disturbed. You rise from the stool, feeling the stiffness in your knees and hips that always accumulates during a long sit, and you stretch your arms overhead, your spine giving a soft series of clicks. The wind tugs at your cloak as you stand, making the heavy felt billow slightly, and you pull it tighter around your shoulders before you begin to walk. Your staff is in your right hand, its base tapping the ground with a soft, regular thud as you move. Your path takes you first past the sheep pen, where the flock is still pressed together in a dense, pale mass. The wind stirs the fleeces of the outer ewes, ruffling the wool in small circular patterns, but the sheep themselves do not stir. They are accustomed to wind from any direction, and they sleep on with their lamb-like indifference. The old billy goat, however, is awake. He stands at the edge of the pen with his head raised, his ridged horns catching the starlight, and he snorts once as you pass, a dismissive, breathy sound. You nod at him, a silent greeting between two night creatures, and then you move on. The cattle are next, and you see that the wind has caused a small rearrangement among them. The old white ox has turned his massive body so that his back is to the breeze, his great head now facing west instead of north. The brindle cow has done the same, and her calf has pressed itself more tightly against her flank, seeking shelter from a draught that is too mild to need sheltering from. The bull remains in his same position, unmoved and unmovable, his hide rippling occasionally as the wind runs across it in long, smooth strokes. The cattle's breathing is unchanged, deep and slow, and their breath steams faintly in the cooler air, small puffs of vapor that are immediately carried away by the breeze. You continue your walk, moving now toward the open steppe beyond the herd. The wind is more noticeable here, away from the shelter of the tents and the animals. It flows across the grassland with a steady, laminar pressure, pressing the short grass flat in long, silvery waves that move like water. The sound of the wind in the grass is a continuous low shush, a sound that has no beginning and no end, as steady as the sound of the sea. You stand at the outermost point of your patrol and look east into the darkness, feeling the full force of the breeze against your face. The horizon is invisible, the land and sky merged into a single black expanse, but you sense the vast distance out there, the miles of open steppe rolling away toward the marshes and the river. The wind has traveled all that way, and it arrives here carrying the memory of the places it has passed, a cold, clean, faintly wet memory that speaks of water and reeds and the slow movement of marsh birds. You turn and begin to walk back toward the camp, your eyes scanning the ground as you go. The frost that began to form earlier has paused in its advance. The slightly warmer eastern air is just mild enough to keep the grass from freezing further, and the silver rime that coated the blades near your stool is now patchy and thin. You notice other small details as you walk, the way a tuft of dry grass bends and straightens in the wind, the faint tracks of a mouse leading to a small burrow, the dark flattened shape of an old cow pat that has been there since the camp was pitched. These are the mundane signs of a healthy, ordinary night, and you catalogue them without thinking. As you approach the camp again, you see the wind playing with the pile of wooden saddles and harnesses that sits near the supply carts. The saddles are stacked in a neat pyramid, their wooden frames and leather seats protected by a covering of oiled felt, but the wind has found a loose corner of the covering and is lifting it in a slow, rhythmic flap. The sound is a soft, muffled whump that repeats at irregular intervals, and beneath it you can hear the faint creak of leather and wood as the pile shifts slightly with each gust. You walk over to the pile and tuck the loose felt corner under a saddle frame, weighting it with a small stone from the nearby ring of stones. The covering settles and the flapping sound stops, leaving only the steady whisper of the wind. Now you return to your stool, settling onto it with the same careful motion you used hours ago. The wood is cold now, chilled by the long night and the persistent breeze, and you feel the cold through the layers of your trousers. You arrange your cloak so that it covers your legs fully, tucking the edges under your thighs, and you pull the hood forward again. The small watchfire beside you has burned down further. Its coals are deep, pulsing red, and the wind makes them glow more brightly, sending small fleeting waves of orange across the surface of the ember bed. You add a single piece of dried dung to the fire, placing it carefully with your staff so that it sits in the center of the coals. The new fuel catches quickly, and a small flame rises, struggling against the wind but persisting. With the fire tended and your cloak adjusted, you settle into a new phase of the watch, one defined by the presence of the wind. The sound of it is now the dominant note in the night's auditory landscape, a continuous low-pitched hum that underlies everything else. Within that hum, you can pick out smaller, more delicate sounds. The soft rattle of a loose rope toggle against a tent lattice, the rustle of the felt door flaps as they move in their frames, the faint, faraway hiss of the wind passing over the gully. The wind has a voice that is constantly changing and constantly the same, a paradox that makes it easy to listen to for long stretches without fatigue. The temperature continues to drop, but only slightly. The eastern breeze is not as cold as the northern drift it replaced, but it carries a dampness that makes the chill feel more penetrating. You feel it first in your fingers, which have grown cool where they rest on the staff, and you tuck your hands into the sleeves of your cloak, crossing your arms over your chest. The felt of the cloak holds your body heat and slowly warms your fingers, a gradual, creeping comfort that spreads from your palms to your fingertips. The tip of your nose is cool as well, and you duck your head slightly so that your breath, which rises in a faint steam, warms the air inside the hood. These small adjustments to the cold are automatic, learned from a lifetime of nights spent outdoors in every season. You look up at the sky and see that the wind has brought a few thin clouds with it from the east. They are high, wispy formations, cirrus clouds that catch the starlight and glow with a faint silver luminescence. The clouds are moving slowly, their shapes shifting and elongating as the wind shears them, and they pass across the face of the Milky Way like veils drawn over a lamp. The stars behind the clouds are softened, their light diffused into small hazy patches, while the stars in the clear parts of the sky remain sharp and brilliant. The contrast between the veiled and unveiled stars adds a new layer of texture to the night, a gentle, shifting pattern that holds your attention for a long, quiet interval. The morning star, still climbing in the east, is now high enough that it shines through even the thicker patches of cloud. Its light is a steady, piercing white, and it seems to pulse more noticeably now, a slow, deep rhythm that might be a trick of the atmosphere or might be a property of the star itself. You watch it for a while, using it as a fixed point while the clouds drift around it, and you note that its position has shifted significantly since you first noticed it earlier in the night. The sky's slow rotation continues, and the morning star is now a prominent feature of the eastern sky, a beacon that promises the eventual return of the sun. The wind shifts again, not in direction, but in character. It becomes slightly gustier, arriving now in long, slow pulses that build to a soft peak and then fade. During the peaks, the campfires flutter more actively. The tent walls press inward with a gentle, drumming pressure, and the grass bends lower. During the lulls, the fires straighten, the tents relax, and the grass brings back. The rhythm of these gusts is irregular, varying from a few seconds to nearly a minute, and the unpredictability keeps your attention lightly engaged. You find yourself waiting for each gust, not with tension, but with a mild, dreamy anticipation. And when each gust arrives, you feel it as a cool, refreshing pressure against your face and a low, rushing sound in your ears. Between gusts, you can hear the more distant sounds again, the steady cropping of the horses, the low breathing of the cattle, the occasional bleat of a lamb. The wind has not silenced these sounds, but has pushed them slightly farther away, as if the breeze is a transparent curtain that separates you from the herd. The effect is not unpleasant. It makes the animals seem more remote, more dreamlike, and it reinforces your sense of being a solitary guardian at the edge of the sleeping camp. You are the one who stays awake, the one who feels the wind and watches the clouds, while everyone else rests in the shelter of their felt tents. Now the wind brings a new sound, one that you have not heard tonight. It is the distant, mournful call of a wolf, a single, long note that rises and then falls, hovering on the edge of audibility. The call is very far away, perhaps a mile or more, and it is not answered by any other wolf. It is a solitary voice, a lone hunter signaling its presence to an empty plain. The sound is not threatening. Wolves rarely come near the camp, especially when the fires are burning and the dogs are alert. The dog at your feet lifts its head again and growls once, a low, rumbling sound that vibrates through its body, and then, hearing no further calls, it subsides. The wolf does not call again, and the wind carries the memory of the sound away into the west. You think about the wolf for a moment, picturing it out on the dark steppe, its grey coat blending with the frosty grass, its yellow eyes scanning the night for movement. The wolf is a hunter, a creature of the wild, but it is also a part of the same vast pattern that includes the camp, the herd, the stars, and the wind. It belongs here as much as you do, and its presence, even at a distance, is a reminder of the larger world that surrounds the small circle of firelight. You feel no fear, only a quiet, respectful acknowledgement of the wolf's existence, and then you let the thought go, returning your attention to the wind and the clouds. The high, thin clouds have now spread across a larger portion of the sky, their silver-grey edges softening the hard brilliance of the stars. The Milky Way is partially obscured, its powdery trail visible only in patches where the clouds are thinner. The guide star, however, remains clear, pulsing steadily in the northeast, and the morning star blazes through even the thickest veil. The sky is transitioning from the deep, crystalline clarity of midnight to something softer and more diffuse, a slow preparation for the dawn that is still hours away. You note the change with a quiet satisfaction. The night is proceeding as it should, the clouds are a natural part of its texture, and the wind that brought them is simply another thread in the fabric of the watch. Your body has adapted to the wind now, and you feel a deep, comfortable stillness settle over you despite the movement of the air. The cold is a steady, mild presence that you no longer notice. The sound of the wind is a continuous, soothing hum that seems to come from inside your own head. The shifting light of the fires and the stars creates a gentle, flickering pattern that holds your eyes without demanding your attention. You are in a state of alert rest, fully awake but deeply calm, your mind drifting across the surface of the night like a leaf on a slow river. The watch has entered its most peaceful phase, a long, quiet stretch where nothing happens and everything is exactly as it should be. The eastern sky, which has been a uniform blackness all night, now shows the faintest possible lightning. It is not a color, but a quality, a subtle thinning of the dark that you might not notice if you had not been staring at the horizon for hours. The lightning is so slight that it could be a trick of the eyes, a phantom of fatigue, but you know it is real. Dawn is still far away, at least a few more hours of darkness, but the first faint signal has been sent. The morning star, now blazing high in the east, seems to acknowledge this signal. Its light takes on a slightly warmer tone, a hint of gold beneath the white. You watch the eastern horizon for a long time, tracking the almost imperceptible progress of the light, and you feel a quiet gratitude for the constancy of the cycle, the reliable return of the sun that never fails. The wind, as if sensing the distant approach of dawn, begins to ease. The gusts become less frequent, the lulls longer, and the steady pressure against your cloak diminishes. The smoke from the campfires starts to rise straighter again, the thin clouds slow their westward drift, and the grass stands more upright between the gusts. The eastern breeze is giving way to a calmer, more settled air, a stillness that will likely hold until the sun warms the land and stirs the winds of the day. You welcome the return of the stillness, but you also find that you will miss the wind's companionship. It has been a presence during this middle stretch of the watch, a voice in the darkness, and its departure leaves a small, quiet absence. You stand one more time before the final hours of the watch begin, walking slowly around the eastern flank. The patrol is brief this time, just a short loop to check the sheep pen and the nearest cattle. Everything is as it was, the flock still pressed together, the cattle still lying with their backs to the vanished wind, the horses still grazing with their slow, hobbled steps. The frost has not returned, and the air is slightly warmer than before, the damp eastern influence lingering even after the breeze has died. You return to your stool, feeling the pleasant tiredness of a long watch in your limbs, and you settle in for the remaining hours of darkness. The wind has come and gone, the sky has shifted, the night has moved through another of its quiet changes, and you have been here for all of it, a steady, attentive presence at the edge of the sleeping camp. A new stillness settles over the camp in the deep hours after the wind has gone. The air, which had been flowing steadily from the east, now lies completely motionless, a great pool of cold that sits over the steppe without stirring. With the wind's departure, the temperature has dropped once more, and this time the cold has a sharper edge, a crystalline clarity that makes every small sound ring with a faint, bell-like purity. You notice the change first in the way your breath now steams in front of your face, a soft plume of vapor that rises and vanishes, each exhalation a small ghost that lives for only a second. The dog at your feet has curled itself into a tighter ball, its nose tucked under its tail, and its breathing has become slower and deeper, as if sleep itself is a way of conserving warmth. You turn your attention outward from the stool, scanning the camp with eyes that have long since adapted to the dim light of dying fires, and you see the frost beginning to arrive. It comes not in a sudden wave, but as a gradual, patient transformation of the surfaces of the world. First it appears on the grass nearest to your stool, a faint silver rime that catches the starlight and glints with a cold, blue-white sparkle. The individual blades of grass, which earlier were dark and invisible, now stand out as delicate pale lines etched against the black earth, each one outlined in a fur of tiny crystals. The frost spreads slowly outward from this starting point, advancing across the short turf like a silent tide, and within minutes the entire ground around your position is dusted with a thin, luminous coating that crunches softly underfoot if you shift your weight. The felt of the distant tents, visible as dark, rounded shapes against the slightly lighter sky, also begins to catch the frost. You see it first as a subtle lightening along the roof ridges, a pale silver edge that defines the curve of each yurt against the darkness. Then the frost creeps down the sloping walls, spreading in patches that merge and connect until the tents on the outer ring of the camp seem to glow faintly, as if they are not reflecting light but generating a cold luminescence of their own. The smoke holes, which have been sending up thin, straight columns of pale smoke, now show a rim of white around their edges where the frost has crystallized on the felt, a delicate, lace-like ring that dissolves as the warm smoke touches it and reforms the moment the smoke passes. The supply carts near the camp edge are also transformed. Their wooden frames, dark and weathered by years of use, wear the frost as a thin, white fur that highlights every scratch and grain in the wood. The leather straps and ropes that bind the carts are stiff with cold, their surfaces glittering with tiny ice crystals that make them look like strands of rough silver. The felt packs stacked between the carts have absorbed the frost into their outer fibers, so that they appear softer, more blurred, their edges less distinct than they were in the earlier part of the night. The whole outer rim of the camp has taken on a quiet, enchanted quality, a world preserved in a thin shell of ice, and you are the only one awake to see it. Now your attention is drawn back to the fires. The night has progressed far enough that many of the campfires have burned down to their last stage of life. Across the camp, where earlier there were bright, steady flames and tall columns of smoke, you now see mostly ember beds, pulsing orange hearts that glow with a deep, rhythmic light. The flames that remain are few and small, short tongues of blue and yellow that flicker weakly at the edges of the coals, and most of the fires are simply mounds of glowing fuel that cast a low, ruddy light on the ground around them. The quality of the shadows has changed with this shift in the light source. They are softer now, more diffuse, lacking the sharp edges that the taller flames produced. The tents appear less distinct, their walls blending into the general dimness, and the spaces between the yurts are filled with a warm amber twilight that pulses very gently in time with the breathing of the coals. You look directly at the nearest family fire, the one belonging to the tent of the old widow. It has burned down to a flat, circular bed of embers, the individual dung pats still visible as darker shapes within the orange mass. A single small flame persists at the center, a thin, wavering spire of blue that rises and falls, as if the fire is breathing its last breaths. The stones that ring the fire are black on the outside, but glow with a dull red on their inner faces, the heat having penetrated the rock over the long hours of burning. The sight of this fading fire stirs a quiet impulse in you, a sense that the time has come for a small act of care, a tending of the flames that hold back the dark. You rise from the stool, your body moving with the slow, deliberate economy of motion that the long watch has taught you. The cold has stiffened your knees and hips slightly, and you take a moment to stretch, rolling your shoulders and flexing your fingers inside the warmth of your cloak. Then you walk, not hurrying, toward the fuel pile that sits between the old widow's tent and the next dwelling. The pile is a neat stack of dried dung pats, each one about the size of a spread hand, their edges rough and fibrous. The dung has been collected from the herd over many days, shaped into flat cakes, and dried in the sun and wind until it is light, odorless, and ready to burn. The pile is a communal resource, a shared store of winter fuel that everyone in the camp contributes to and draws from, and you approach it with the respect due to a thing that sustains life. You kneel beside the pile, feeling the cold of the frozen ground press through the wool of your trousers, and you select several pats with care. The first one you lift is light in your hand, its surface rough but not crumbly, its color a pale gray-brown that speaks of dry summer grass converted by the cattle into this compact, burnable form. The dung carries a faint, grassy scent, a ghost of the pastures where the herd grazed months ago, and beneath that scent is the clean, earthy smell of sun-dried fiber. You turn the pat over in your hand, feeling its texture, noting the way the edges flake slightly where the drying process has left them brittle. This one is good fuel, dry and dense, and you set it aside before selecting two more of similar quality. With 3 pats cradled in the crook of your arm, you rise and walk slowly toward the dying fire. The widow's fire is surrounded by a circle of blackened stones, and you step carefully over the outer ring, placing your feet on the bare earth where the grass has been worn away by many similar visits. You crouch down, balancing on the balls of your feet, and you use the iron poker that leans against one of the stones, a simple rod with a hooked end to gently rearrange the embers. You push the still glowing coals into a loose mound at the center, creating a small hill of heat, and you scrape away the fine white ash that is accumulated at the edges. The ash lifts in a soft, weightless cloud that drifts a few inches and then settles back to the earth. The coals, disturbed by the poker, flare briefly brighter, their orange light intensifying, and you feel a wave of warmth wash over your face, a gentle, enveloping heat that makes your cheeks tingle in the cold air. Now you take the first dung pat and place it carefully on top of the mound of embers, positioning it so that it sits squarely in the center. The pat immediately begins to smoke, a thin, pale wisp that curls upward from the point of contact, and you lean forward and blow softly, a steady, controlled stream of air that feeds the smoldering spot. The smoke thickens, turns from white to grey, and then with a soft whump that you feel more than hear, a small flame ignites. The flame is a thin blue tongue at first, trembling at the edge of the pat, and then it strengthens, spreading across the surface in a widening circle of yellow and orange. The heat increases, and you feel it on your face in a gentle, pulsing wave, a rhythm of warmth that matches the flicker of the newborn flame. You add the second pat, placing it beside the first so that the two are touching, and then the third, arranging them in a loose triangle that leaves gaps for the air to flow through. The fire takes hold of all 3 pats with a soft, crackling hunger, and soon a small but steady blaze is burning in the stone circle, its flames reaching up perhaps a hand's length above the fuel. The light from this renewed fire pushes back the darkness a little further, illuminating the curved wall of the widow's tent and the frost that sparkles on its felt surface. The smoke, now thicker and whiter, rises in a straight column into the still air, its ascent unhindered by any wind. You stay crouched for a moment longer, watching the fire to ensure that it has caught properly, and you feel the honor of this small task settle over you. There is no audience to observe your work, no chief to thank you, no reward beyond the simple satisfaction of seeing the flames burn steady and strong. The tending of the fires is a duty that passes from guard to guard through the night, a quiet chain of small actions that keep the camp alive and warm. You are a link in that chain now, a pair of hands that have carried the fuel and coaxed the flame, and the knowledge of this place in the order of things is a deep, wordless comfort. You rise slowly, your knees protesting slightly, and you move on to the next fire that needs attention. This one is nearer the chief's tent, a larger fire that serves as a communal hearth for the center of the camp. It has burned down to a broad, shallow bed of coals that glows with a deep, somber red, the color of cooling iron. A few stray flames lick weakly at the edges, but the fire is clearly in need of fresh fuel. You walk to the fuel pile beside the chief's tent, a larger stack than the others, and you select 5 pats this time, carrying them in a small stack held against your chest. The walk is short, only a dozen paces, and your feet make a soft crunching sound on the frosty grass. At the chief's fire, you repeat the same careful ritual. You use the poker, a longer and heavier one that leans against the chief's tent, to draw the coals into a central mound, scraping away the ash and exposing the glowing heart of the fire. The heat from this larger bed of embers is more intense, and you feel it on your face and hands as you work, a deep, penetrating warmth that seems to seep into your bones. You place the 5 pats one by one, arranging them in a ring around the central mound, and then you lean in and blow, your breath mingling with the smoke that rises. The pats ignite in sequence, their flames joining together to form a single, substantial blaze, and the light from this renewed fire spreads across the open space in front of the chief's tent, illuminating the carved wooden door frame and the felt hangings that decorate the entrance. You pause for a moment, leaning on the poker, and you watch the fire take hold. The flames are taller here, fed by the larger quantity of fuel, and they dance with a slow, heavy motion, their tips curling and folding over themselves in a continuous, fluid movement. The sound of the fire is a soft roar, a distant rumbling noise that is both powerful and peaceful. The frost on the nearby tents has begun to melt where the warmth reaches it, forming tiny droplets of water that slide down the felt and drip onto the ground with a faint, intermittent patter. The contrast between the cold of the night and the warmth of the fire is a satisfying physical sensation, a reminder of the balance that the watch maintains. You return the poker to its place, leaning it carefully against the tent walls so that it will not fall, and then you step back from the fire. Your work here is done, and the flames will now burn steadily for another few hours, holding the darkness at bay until the dawn arrives. You feel a quiet pride in the task, not a boastful pride, but a simple, clean satisfaction, the feeling of a thing well done that needs no recognition. Now, with the 2 fires tended, you begin a slow walk around the camp, checking the other hearths to see if any more need fuel. Most of the family fires are still burning adequately, their ember beds deep and hot, and you do not disturb them. A few, however, are like the widow's fire was, reduced to thin, scattered coals that are barely holding their heat, and at each of these you stop and add 1 or 2 pats from the nearest fuel pile. The actions become a quiet rhythm. Walk, kneel, arrange the coals, place the fuel, blow gently, watch the flame catch, rise, walk on. Each repetition is slightly different. The coals are different shape, the fuel a slightly different texture, but the essence of the ritual remains the same, a steady, meditative sequence of small, caring gestures. At one fire, near the tent of a young family with a new baby, you find that the fuel pile is running low. You make a mental note to tell the day watch so that more dung can be brought from the main supply near the carts, and then use the last 2 pats to revive the fire, placing them with particular care so that they will burn long and slow. The baby inside the tent stirs as you work, letting out a small, querulous cry that is immediately soothed by the mother's murmuring voice, and then the silence returns. You feel a connection to that unseen family, a sense that your small act of tending their fire is a way of watching over them as well, a protection as real as the staff in your hand. The frost continues to thicken as you walk, and now to spread beyond the grass and the felt tents to cover every exposed surface in the camp. The wooden stools that sit outside some of the yurts are coated in a thin white crust that makes them look like pieces of sugar sculpture. The water skins that hang from the cart frames have a rime of ice around their stoppers, and the leather buckets near the spring are stiff and unyielding to the touch. Even the dog, still curled at your stool, has a dusting of frost on the thick fur of its back, a fine white powder that sparkles when the firelight catches it. The dog does not seem to mind. It sleeps on, its sides rising and falling with the slow, deep rhythm of an animal that is perfectly adapted to the cold. You complete your circuit of the fires and return to your stool, brushing the frost from the seat with a sweep of your gloved hand before you sit. The wood is cold despite the clearing, and you arrange your cloak so that it provides an extra layer between you and the chill. The renewed fires are now burning brightly at several points around the camp, and their combined light has changed the quality of the night. The darkness is no longer as deep or as uniform. It is broken by pools of warm amber radiance that overlap and merge, creating a shifting golden landscape of light and shadow. The frost, lit from below by the fires and from above by the stars, glitters with 1,000 tiny points of light, as if the camp is covered in a layer of crushed diamonds. You take a moment to appreciate the texture of the dried dung fuel, a few crumbs of which still cling to your gloves. You lift a small piece to your nose and inhale its scent, dry, grassy, slightly sweet, with no hint of the animal it came from. The transformation from grass to dung to fuel to ash is a cycle that you have known all your life, a cycle as natural and as necessary as the turning of the stars. The cattle eat the grass of the steppe, their bodies converted into the fibrous cakes that you now hold, and those cakes, when burned, release the stored sunlight of months past into the cold night air. The ash that remains will be scattered on the ground, enriching the soil, and next year's grass will grow a little greener for it. The thought is not a conscious philosophy, but a felt understanding, a sense of the rightness of things that gives your small tasks their meaning. Now you settle onto the stool once more, your body finding its familiar position, and you let your gaze wander out across the frost-covered steppe. The plain is a vast pale expanse under the starlight, the silver rime on the grass making the ground seem to glow with a cold internal light. The shapes of the distant cattle and horses are barely visible, their dark bodies standing out against the pale frost-like islands in a frozen sea. The mist that filled the low ground earlier has vanished, replaced by this thin, icy crust that covers everything equally, and the air is so clear that the stars seem closer, their light sharper and more intense. You pull the hood of your cloak forward once more and settle into the long, quiet stretch that remains before dawn. The fires you have tended will now burn steadily, holding back the cold, and the camp will sleep on in its cocoon of frost and firelight. The watch continues, and you are content to sit, a silent guardian at the edge of the camp, while the frost thickens and the stars wheel slowly toward morning. The night has now entered its most profound and motionless phase, the hours when the world seems to hold its breath before the first faint signal of the returning sun. You have been seated on your stool for a long, unmeasured stretch, the cold a steady companion, the stars a silent audience, the fires you tended now burning with a quiet, confident light. The frost that arrived earlier has completed its work and now lies thick and even across every surface, a thin, brittle crust that gives the camp a unified, pale appearance, as if the whole settlement has been carved from a single block of moonlit ice. The stillness around you is so complete that you can hear the faint, faraway sound of your own heartbeat when you listen for it, a soft, regular thud that marks the passage of time in place of any clock. Your body has settled into the stool so completely that you are no longer aware of the boundary between yourself and the wood. You are simply a presence, a point of awareness suspended in the cold, dark air. The felt cloak wraps you in its familiar embrace, the wool heavy and warm, and your hands rest inside its folds, your fingers curled loosely around the smooth wood of your staff. The dog at your feet has not moved for a long time. It lies in a tight, frost-dusted circle, its breathing so slow and deep that its sides barely seem to rise. Even the dog's dreams have stilled, the twitching legs and muffled barks of earlier hours replaced by a profound, motionless sleep. The camp behind you is a dark cluster of quiet mounds, the yurts rounded and soft under their coating of frost, their smoke holes sending up only the thinnest wisps of vapor now. The fires you revived are burning low but steady, their flames reduced to a state of calm, pulsing embers that glow with a deep, somnolent red. No figures move between the tents, no doors flap open, no voices murmur. The entire community is suspended in the deepest part of its nightly rest, the sleep that comes just before the body begins its slow preparation for waking. You are the only conscious presence in this landscape of sleep, and your wakefulness feels less like an effort and more like a natural function of the night, as essential and automatic as the stars' slow rotation. During this profound stillness, your mind begins to drift. It is not a drift toward sleep, but a drift through memory, a slow, undirected wandering across the landscape of your past. You have been a guard for many years, in many camps, under many different skies, and the quiet of this particular night opens a door to those earlier watches. The memories come not as a narrative, but as a series of gentle, disconnected images and sensations that float through your awareness like leaves on a slow stream. You see a winter camp from 5 years ago, its tents half buried in deep snow, the fires burning with a fierce, crackling light against the white. You feel the particular way the frost formed on a saddle left outside one autumn night, a delicate, feathery pattern of crystals that melted the moment the sun touched them. You smell the smoke of a fire made from a different kind of dung, gathered from a herd that grazed on the southern plains where the grass grows taller and sweeter. These memories do not demand your attention or stir any strong emotion. They are simply present, a quiet parade of images that your mind offers up in the silence. You let them come and go, neither clinging to them nor pushing them away, and you find that they blend seamlessly with your perception of the present moment. The frost on the tents before you is also the frost on that old saddle. The smoke from the chief's fire is also the smoke from that long-ago winter camp. The stars overhead are the same stars that shone on every watch you have ever kept. Time seems to fold in on itself, the past and the present becoming a single continuous fabric, and you are the thread that runs through all of it. A particular memory surfaces and holds your attention for a while, a night watch from your younger years, when you were still learning the rhythms of the guard. You remember the older man who trained you, a silent, patient figure with a grey beard and hands that never seemed to feel the cold. He taught you the small things, how to arrange the fuel so that it burns long and even, how to read the wind's changes before they arrive, how to sit still for hours without growing restless. More than the specific lessons, you remember the quality of his presence, the way he seemed to merge with the night, becoming a part of its stillness rather than a separate observer. You have tried to carry that quality into your own watches, and tonight, in the deep silence before dawn, you feel that you have perhaps succeeded. The student has become the teacher, and somewhere, perhaps, there is a younger guard watching you and learning the same quiet lessons. The memory fades, and another surfaces, a night when a sudden storm blew in from the north, a violent, crashing tempest of wind and hail that scattered the sheep and made the cattle bellow in terror. You remember the chaos of that night, the way the fires were extinguished in an instant, the way the tents strained against their ropes, the frantic shouting of the herders as they rushed to secure the animals. It was the only night of your career when the watch was anything but peaceful, and you remember it, not with fear, but with a quiet pride, because by dawn the storm had passed and the herd was safe. Tonight could not be more different from that night. The air is motionless, the sky is clear, the animals are deeply asleep, and the only sound is the soft, distant whisper of the fires. The contrast is a comfort, a reminder that most nights are like this one, calm and uneventful, a steady rhythm of peace. Your mind drifts further now, moving beyond specific memories into a more abstract realm of thought. You find yourself contemplating the nature of the watch itself, the strange and ancient duty of staying awake while others sleep. The watch is a kind of gift, you realize, a gift of time and attention that you offer to your family and your community. While they rest, you remain alert. While they dream, you observe. While they are vulnerable, you are their shield. The gift is given freely and without expectation of reward, and it is received by most of the sleepers without their conscious knowledge. But the gift is no less real for being invisible, and the safety of the camp is its tangible result. The thought settles into your mind with a quiet warmth, a sense of purpose that needs no external validation. You shift slightly on the stool, your body responding to a small ache in your lower back, and the movement brings you back to the immediate presence. You look out across the frost-covered steppe, your eyes tracing the familiar line of the horizon, and you see that the darkness is still absolute. The morning star, blazing high in the east, is the only sign that the night will eventually end, and even it seems remote and patient, in no hurry to herald the dawn. The Milky Way has swung further toward the west, its powdery trail now descending toward the horizon, and new stars have risen in the east to replace those that have set. The sky continues its silent, majestic rotation, and you continue to watch it, a still point in the center of the turning sphere. Now a new image comes to you, not a memory, but a kind of waking dream, a vision of the steppe as it might appear from a great height. You imagine the camp as a tiny cluster of lights in a vast, dark plain, the fires like a handful of scattered embers on a black carpet. Around the camp, the steppe stretches out for miles in every direction, empty and silent, its grasses bending under the weight of the frost. Beyond the steppe, the mountains rise in the far distance, their snow-covered peaks catching the starlight and glowing with a faint spectral radiance. And above it all the sky arches like a great bowl of dark crystal, its stars burning with a steady, eternal light. The image is so vivid that for a moment you feel as if you have left your body and are floating above the world, a disembodied observer of the vast, peaceful landscape. Then the sensation passes, and you are back on your stool, your hands resting on your staff, your breath steaming in the cold air. The dog stirs briefly, its legs twitching once, twice, and then it relaxes again, a soft whimper escaping its closed muzzle. You wonder what the dog dreams of, what images pass through its sleeping mind. Perhaps it dreams of running across the steppe, chasing the swift, shadowy shapes of hare or fox. Perhaps it dreams of the warmth of the fire and the taste of the bones it gnawed earlier in the day. Perhaps it dreams of nothing at all, simply resting in a state of pure, wordless peace. You reach down and rest your hand on its flank, feeling the coarse fur and the slow, steady rhythm of its breathing. The dog does not wake, but its tail gives a single sleepy thump, an acknowledgement of your touch that does not disturb its rest. You become aware of the smell of the cold itself, a clean, sharp scent that fills your nostrils and clears the last vestiges of drowsiness from your mind. The cold has a smell. You have always thought a scent that is not like any other, dry and pure and faintly metallic, as if the air itself has been scoured clean by the frost. It is the smell of deep winter, of the months when the steppe lies under a blanket of snow and the fires must be fed constantly to keep the darkness at bay. Tonight, the cold is not yet that severe, but the smell is a preview, a promise of the season to come. You inhale deeply, letting the crisp air fill your lungs, and you feel a quiet exhilaration, a sense of being fully alive in the midst of the sleeping world. Your thoughts turn now to the distant mountains that you imagined a moment ago, and you realize that you can actually see them from where you sit. On very clear nights, when the air is cold and dry, the highest peaks are visible as a faint, jagged line on the far southern horizon, their snow caps catching the starlight with a pale, ghostly gleam. You search for them now, your eyes straining against the darkness, and after a moment you find them, a thin, barely perceptible silhouette that separates the black of the earth from the black of the sky. The mountains are many days' ride away, a journey that the camp will never make, but their presence is a familiar landmark, a fixed point in a landscape that is otherwise defined by grass and sky. You let your gaze rest on the distant peaks, and you feel a kinship with them, a sense that they too are watchers, standing silent and eternal over the sleeping plain. The faint flicker of lightning that you saw earlier in the north has long since vanished, and the sky in that direction is now as clear as the rest. The storm, wherever it went, has moved on to some other part of the steppe, leaving behind only the memory of its distant light. You scan the northern horizon carefully, your eyes moving in a slow, methodical sweep, but there is nothing there, no sign of movement or change. The night is utterly, completely peaceful, a vast, dark stillness that stretches from horizon to horizon without interruption. Now the cold begins to deepen further, the temperature dropping by another small, imperceptible increment. You feel it first in your feet, which have grown cool inside your felt boots despite the warmth of your cloak. You shift your position slightly, lifting one foot and then the other, flexing your toes to encourage the circulation. The small movement is enough to restore a measure of warmth, and you settle again, pulling the cloak more tightly around your legs. The frost on the ground near your stool has thickened, its crystals growing larger and more intricate, and the blades of grass are now completely encased in tiny, shining sheaths of ice. The world is being preserved in a thin, frozen shell, held in suspension until the sun returns to release it. You think about the sun, which is still far below the eastern horizon, but which is now beginning its long journey toward the surface of the earth. The morning star, blazing high above the place where the sun will rise, is a visible promise of that return, and you find yourself glancing at it more and more often as the deep hours pass. The star seems to grow brighter as the night progresses, its light taking on a warmer, more golden tone, and you imagine that you can almost feel the faintest hint of the sun's energy radiating from it. The thought is a comfort, a reminder that the cold and the darkness are temporary, that the cycle will continue as it always has. Your mind drifts once more, and this time it settles on the faces of your family, who are sleeping in the tent behind you. You picture them as they are now, wrapped in their heavy wool blankets, their breathing slow and peaceful, their faces relaxed in sleep. Your partner lies on the left side of the tent, closest to the door, one arm stretched out to the empty space where you would normally be. Your children are curled together on the right side, their small bodies radiating a gentle warmth that fills the enclosed space. The image is so clear in your mind that you can almost smell the familiar scent of the tent, a mixture of wool, smoke, and the sweet, milky smell of the children's hair. You feel a surge of quiet love for them, not a dramatic or overwhelming emotion, but a steady, abiding affection that is as constant as the stars. They are the reason you sit here in the cold, the reason you keep the watch night after night, and the knowledge fills you with a deep, quiet satisfaction. The deep hours continue to pass, slow and silent, and you continue to sit, your body still, your mind drifting, your eyes scanning the darkness with a vigilance that has become automatic. The watch is no longer a task, but a state of being, a way of existing in the world that feels as natural as breathing. You are the guard, the watcher, the silent presence at the edge of the camp, and you will remain here until the first light of dawn releases you from your duty. The night wraps around you like a second cloak, and you settle into it, patient and calm, while the stars wheel overhead and the frost thickens on the grass. The long, motionless hours of deep night begin at last to yield, not in a sudden or dramatic way, but through a series of changes so subtle that you might miss them if you had not been watching the eastern horizon with the patience of a lifetime. The first sign is not a lightening of the sky, but a change in the quality of the darkness itself. A faint thinning that occurs so gradually it feels more like a shift in your own perception than an external event. The blackness that has been absolute and unbroken for so many hours now seems to have a texture, a depth, as if the solid wall of night has become a series of thin, transparent veils laid one over the other. The horizon line, which has been invisible since the moon set, now makes itself known as a faint division between the dark of the earth and the slightly less dark of the sky, a seam in the fabric of the world that grows more distinct with each slow minute. You straighten on your stool, feeling the pleasant stiffness in your spine that comes from long stillness, and you turn your full attention to the east. The morning star, which has been climbing through the night with a steady, patient brilliance, now hangs at its highest point above the place where the sun will rise. Its light, which was a cool, piercing white during the deep hours, has taken on a warmer tone. A hint of gold at its core that pulses very gently, a slow, rhythmic variation that might be a trick of the atmosphere or might be the star's own nature. The star seems larger now, more present, a blazing beacon that dominates the eastern sky and draws your eyes toward it with an almost magnetic pull. You watch it for a long, quiet interval, noting how its light seems to push back the darkness around it, creating a small halo of indigo in the black. Below the morning star, the horizon begins its transformation. The change is so slow that you cannot see it happening. You can only notice, at intervals, that something has shifted. The black becomes a deep charcoal grey, a colour that is not yet light but is no longer purely dark. And this grey spreads upward from the horizon in a thin, flat band that widens by imperceptible degrees. The band is the colour of slate, of cold ash, of the felt of a very old tent that has been weathered by many seasons, and it holds no warmth yet, only a promise of warmth to come. You fix your eyes on this band and you watch it. Your breathing slow and even, your body perfectly still, and you feel a quiet sense of anticipation that is entirely without urgency. The stars in the eastern sky respond to this change by beginning to fade. Not the morning star, which holds its brightness with a steady, stubborn intensity, but the fainter stars around it, the small, scattered points of light that have been companions through the night. They dim one by one, their light dissolving into the growing greyness like grains of salt dissolving into water, and the constellations you have been watching for hours begin to lose their shapes. The tight cluster like a mare with foals, now far to the west, is still visible, still glittering, but the stars in the east are disappearing, receding into the pale veil of approaching dawn. The sky is preparing itself for the sun, clearing a space for the great light that will soon arrive. The frost on the grass catches this earliest hint of dawn in a way that the air itself does not. You look down from the sky and you see that the ground around your stool has become faintly visible, the frost appearing not as white, but as a subtle lightening of the earth, a pale silvery sheen that defines the shapes of the grass blades and the contours of the soil. The frost is still thick, the crystals still intact, but now they seem to glow from within, as if they are storing up the first faint rays of the sun and reflecting them back to the sky. The tents of the camp, which have been dark mounds in the blackness, are now visible as rounded, pale shapes, their frost-covered surfaces catching the pre-dawn light and seeming to float on a shallow sea of silver mist. The mist itself, which vanished during the deep cold of the night, has returned in a different form. It now lies in the low ground as a thin, transparent layer that moves slowly, drifting in the still air like a breath exhaled by the earth. The mist softens the edges of the landscape, blurring the boundary between the frosty grass and the dark shapes of the distant cattle, and it gives the whole scene a dreamlike quality, a sense of floating between night and day. The cattle themselves are beginning to stir. You see one dark shape lift its head, its horns catching a faint gleam of star sheen, and then the head lowers again, the animal not yet ready to rise. Now the band of grey at the horizon begins to change colour. The deep slate tone lightens by degrees, passing through a series of subtle, nameless hues, a cold blue-grey like the belly of a fish, then a softer, lavender grey like the smoke of dried sage, then a pale, pearly grey that seems almost luminous. The transition takes a long time, many minutes of slow, steady brightening, and you watch it with the patience of someone who has seen this same sequence unfold on hundreds of mornings. Each phase of the dawn has its own character, its own particular quality of light, and you know them all, not by names but by the way they make you feel. The blue-grey phase is one of quiet expectation, the lavender-grey phase is one of gentle hope, the pearly-grey phase is one of calm certainty that the sun will indeed return. A rooster crows from somewhere near the supply carts, a single clarion call that cuts through the still air with a startling clarity. The sound is the first deliberate voice of the waking camp, and it seems to acknowledge you alone, a greeting from the animal world to the solitary guard who has kept the night watch. The rooster crows again, a longer, more elaborate call this time, and then it falls silent. A moment later, another rooster answers from the far side of the camp, its voice fainter and more distant, a thin, reedy echo of the first. The exchange hangs in the air for a few seconds, and then the stillness returns, deeper than before. The rooster's call stirs something in the camp. You hear, from within the nearest tents, the first small sounds of human waking, a cough, a low murmur of voices, the rustle of blankets being pushed back. These sounds are quiet and unhurried, the sounds of people who are not yet fully awake, but who are beginning the slow process of returning from sleep. A thin column of smoke rises from a tent where an older woman has stirred the internal hearth, adding a fresh piece of dung to the embers so that the fire will be ready for the morning tea. The smoke drifts straight up in the still air, pale against the lightening sky, and then it bends slightly as a faint breath of morning air moves through the camp. You rise from the stool, your body responding with a series of small, satisfying stretches. The stiffness in your knees and hips has settled deep into your joints, and you move slowly, deliberately, allowing your muscles to lengthen and warm. You roll your shoulders, feeling the weight of the cloak shift across your back, and you flex your fingers inside your gloves, the blood returning to the tips with a faint, tingling warmth. The dog at your feet stirs as you stand, lifting its head from its paws and blinking its dark, liquid eyes. It yawns hugely, its pink tongue curling, and then it gets to its feet with a soft grunting effort, shaking itself so that the frost flies from its fur in a small, glittering cloud. The dog looks up at you, its tail wagging slowly, and then it turns and trots toward the camp, its duties for the night apparently complete. You take your staff in hand and begin a slow walk around the eastern perimeter, your final patrol of the watch. The ground crunches softly under your boots, the frost resisting for a moment before giving way, and each step leaves a dark, temporary print in the silver grass. The sheep in their pen are beginning to stir as well. A few of the ewes are on their feet, their breath steaming in the cold air, and the lambs are nuzzling at their mother's sides, seeking the first milk of the morning. The old billy goat stands at the edge of the pen, as he has stood all night, his ridged horns catching the pale light, and he watches you pass with his strange, horizontal pupa eyes. You nod at him, a silent farewell, and he blinks once, slowly, as if in acknowledgement. The cattle are next, and you see that the old white ox is already awake, his great head raised, his breath pluming out in long, slow clouds. He watches you approach with his patient, liquid eyes, and you feel a quiet affection for this beast who has been part of the herd since before you took your first watch. The brindle cow is still lying down, but her calf is on its feet, its small body pressed close to her side, its tail flicking idly. The bull remains in his same position, a vast, dark mound of muscle and hide, but his eyes are open now, and they track your movement with a calm, indifferent awareness. You pass them all, walking the same arc you walked hours ago, and you note that all are present, all are well, all are beginning the slow, instinctive process of greeting the day. Beyond the cattle, the horses are visible as pale, moving shapes against the grey grass. The grey mare is still grazing, her head down, her hubble leathers creaking softly, but her colt is now standing beside her, its spindly legs steady, its ears pricked forward with the alert curiosity of the young. The colt sees you and stares, its large dark eyes fixed on your approaching figure, and then it skitters sideways a few steps, pressing close to its mother's flank. The mare raises her head briefly, her jaws still grinding a mouthful of grass, and she regards you with the calm familiarity of an animal that knows your shape and your scent and the sound of your footsteps. You stop a respectful distance away, and you watch them for a moment, the mare and her foal, a small family unit within the larger family of the herd. Then you turn and walk back toward the camp, your patrol complete. The sky has continued to lighten while you walked, and now the transformation is unmistakable. The band of grey at the horizon has widened and brightened, and its colour has shifted from pearly grey to a pale, clear yellow that is almost the colour of butter. Above this yellow band, the sky fades through a sequence of delicate pastel shades, a soft greenish blue like the inside of a duck's egg, then a pure pale turquoise, then a deeper blue that still holds a few of the brightest stars. The morning star, still blazing in the east, is now surrounded by this luminous colour, and its light seems to pulse more slowly, as if it is breathing in time with the approaching dawn. Soon it will be swallowed by the growing light, but for now it remains a brilliant, solitary beacon. The camp is waking more fully now. You hear the sound of a tent flap being thrown open, the stiff felt scraping against the wooden frame, and a figure emerges into the grey light. It is an older woman, one of the grandmothers, and she carries a small bronze pot in her hands. She walks to the nearest fire, which is burned down to a bed of coals, and she crouches to blow it back to life, her cheeks rounding and hollowing with the same practiced rhythm you used hours ago. A second figure emerges from another tent, a young boy sent to fetch water from the leather buckets, and he walks with the slow, stumbling gait of someone not yet fully awake. The sounds of the camp multiply, the clink of a pot, the murmur of voices, the bleat of a lamb, the lowing of a cow, the barking of a dog somewhere on the far side of the settlement. These are the sounds of morning, the sounds of a community preparing to meet the new day, and they are as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. You pause at the easternmost point of the camp, where the ground slopes gently down toward the open steppe. From this vantage point, you can see the full sweep of the dawn unfolding across the plain. The rim of the earth, which was a flat black line when you first sat down on your stool, is now a distinct curved edge that separates the pale yellow sky from the darker, frost-covered land. The frost itself is beginning to soften, its crystals losing their sharp edges as the temperature inches upward, and the grass is emerging from its icy sheath, its grey-green colour returning as the light grows stronger. The distant hills, which were invisible all night, are now visible as low, rolling shapes on the southern horizon, their slopes covered in a patchwork of frost and bare earth. A flock of birds rises from the gully, small dark shapes that swirl upward in a tight, coordinated spiral. They are larks, perhaps, or finches, and their voices are a chorus of high, sweet notes that ring out over the still plain. The sound is the first true music of the morning, a wild, joyful noise that seems to celebrate the return of the sun. The birds climb higher and higher, their flock stretching into a long, flowing ribbon, and then they turn as one and stream away toward the west, their voices fading into the distance. You watch them go, feeling a quiet kinship with these creatures who also greet the dawn with their own form of watchfulness. Now the yellow band at the horizon begins to intensify, its pale, buttery color deepening to a rich golden hue that seems to glow from within. The clouds that drifted in during the night, now thin and scattered, catch this golden light on their undersides, turning them into streaks of rose and coral that stretch across the eastern sky. The effect is breathtaking in its quiet beauty, a slow, silent symphony of color that plays out across the dome of the heavens. You have seen this same display on countless mornings, but it never grows old, never loses its power to stir a quiet sense of wonder in the depths of your chest. The dawn is a gift, a daily renewal, and you are its grateful recipient. You feel the first indirect warmth of the sun on your face, a faint golden sensation that is more a promise than a reality. The air is still cold, the frost still thick, but the light itself carries a subtle heat, a hint of the warmth that will come when the sun finally breaks the horizon. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the light wash over your eyelids, and you feel a deep, abiding peace settle over you. The watch is nearly done, the night has passed safely, the camp is waking, and you have played your small part in the great cycle of the steppe. When you open your eyes again, the world seems a little brighter, a little warmer, a little more fully alive. The morning star, still burning in the brightening sky, now seems to flicker, its light wavering as the atmosphere thickens with the approaching day. It will soon be invisible, swallowed by the vast golden light of the sun, but for now it remains a steady, faithful presence, the last star of the night. You salute it silently, a small nod of acknowledgement, and then you turn your back to the east and begin to walk slowly toward the center of the camp. The watch is not yet over, but the end is in sight, and you carry the quiet satisfaction of a duty well performed as you make your way between the waking tents. The first light has come, the morning star has guided you through the final hour, and the new day is about to begin. The first sliver of the sun breaks the rim of the earth with a suddenness that always surprises you, no matter how many dawns you have watched. One moment, the horizon is a thin, golden line trembling with the promise of light, and the next moment, the very edge of the sun is there. A bright, molten curve that pushes up through the distant grass with a slow, majestic inevitability. The light that spills across the steppe is a flood of honey and pale gold, a warm liquid radiance that washes over the frost-covered ground and turns every crystal into a tiny blazing point of fire. You pause in your walk back toward the center of the camp, and you turn to face the sunrise, your eyes squinting against the sudden brilliance, and you watch the sun rise in full, a perfect arc of white gold that lifts itself clear of the horizon and begins its long climb into the morning sky. The warmth of the sun reaches you a moment later, a gentle, indirect heat that touches your face and hands with a soft, caressing pressure. It is not yet a strong warmth. The air is still cold and your breath still steams, but the light itself carries a promise of the day to come, a day of mild autumn sunshine and slow, grazing herds. You feel the tiredness of the long night settle into your shoulders and the small of your back, a pleasant, heavy tiredness that is the honest result of work well done, and you know that soon you will be able to rest. But the watch is not yet complete. There is one final duty to perform, the handover that passes the safety of the camp from one pair of hands to another. You turn away from the sunrise and continue walking toward the center of the camp, your staff in your right hand, your felt cloak still wrapped around your shoulders. The camp is now fully awake, its morning life unfolding in a series of quiet, orderly movements that you observe without any need to participate. The older woman who stirred the fire earlier has been joined by two younger women, and together they are setting a large bronze pot over the revived flames. The pot suspended from a tripod of wooden poles. Water from the leather buckets is being poured, and the first curls of steam are rising into the cool air. The young boy who fetched the water is now sitting on a stool near his family's tent, rubbing the sleep from his eyes with the back of his hand, his hair tousled and his expression still dreamy. The dogs are up and moving, their tails wagging as they trot between the tents, sniffing at the ground and greeting each other with brief, casual sniffs of their own. One dog, a lean brown animal with a white chest, approaches you and presses its cold nose into your palm for a moment, its tail beating a slow rhythm, and then it moves on, its morning rounds as routine as your own. The handover point is the same spot where you began your watch so many hours ago, the stool at the eastern edge of the camp, and you see that your relief has already arrived. He is an older man, the guard of many years, with a grey beard that falls in 2 braids onto his chest and a face that is weathered into a network of fine, deep lines. His felt cloak is identical to yours, thick and heavy and smelling of smoke, and he carries his own staff, a length of dark polished wood that is slightly shorter than yours. He is standing beside the stool, his back to the rising sun, and he is holding a cup in both hands, a small, handleless cup made of fired clay that steams gently in the cold air. He does not speak when he sees you approaching, and you do not speak either. The handover is a ritual that requires no words, a quiet exchange of presence that is understood by both parties without the need for explanation. You stop a pace away from the older man and you plant your staff in the soft earth at your side. The two of you stand for a moment in the golden morning light, the sun now fully clear of the horizon and climbing steadily, its warmth beginning to melt the frost on the grass around your feet. The older man nods once, a slow, deliberate inclination of his head that conveys everything that needs to be said. The night has been quiet, the camp is safe, your